Hello there everyone, welcome back to my channel Fanfiction podcast. Today we will start a new journey of what if Dragon kidnapped Luffy from his mother Big Mom. Before we start, please like, share, subscribe, and comment in the comment section if you want anything in the future. Toto Land, the archipelago around the New World that consists of several islands surrounding the main island where a giant woman with a sweet tooth resides. Every island's architecture and constructs are notable for their unusualness. Walls made of biscuits, the rooftops that look like an ice cream. But not only was the architecture unusual, the entire residents and inhabitants of the islands were also quite unusual. Talking flowers, rocks, mountains, doors, almost every inanimate object seemingly having a sentient existence as if they were alive, as if they had a soul inside of them. The most notable island would be the main island, which seemingly looks like it consists of multiple large cakes, especially the one in the center. Whole Cake Island. The main island where a fearsome Yonko resides. There had been several attacks made, but none had succeeded, be it marines, criminals, or any other hostile threats that dare harm the land. None had truly come close, some not even being able to step foot on land and are now sleeping with the fishes and sea kings below. Inside the giant cake castle of Whole Cake Island, there was a giant woman sitting on her throne. She was known as one of the 4 emperors of the sea. A woman who has never bled from her birth to the present times. A woman who had given birth to 86 and raised 85. The captain of the Big Mom pirates. Charlotte Linlin. She was the queen of Toto Land, her ambition being to form a country where all beings of different races or traits that make them stand out is gathered here to live in unity and to coexist. Though her dream was incomplete as there are a few races missing from her grasp such as giants, sky people, Kinokobito, and a near-extinct race, Lunarians. Although, due to an event that happened 17 years ago, she didn't focus on her dream but rather on her children instead, making sure to take care of them and be there for them unlike her past self. She vowed to become a better mother to them all after what had happened to one of them. In addition towards her change, she has slimmed down by a considerable amount. She looked the same as she did when she was around 27 years old. That was thanks to her devil fruit which kept her in good health and seemed to have kept her to look the same throughout decades. By stealing the souls of others, she could maintain her lifespan and youth as long as she has enough souls. In her throne room, almost all of her children gathered around, for Praline who was a mermaid. They put her in a giant fish bowl, although Katakuri and Brulee weren't there, which was a rare occasion due to the fact that most of her children were out doing task as their minister or simply had issues like a pirate or marine attack which would delay them and make them miss the gathering. But on this day all of the children were gathered here for the biggest event that is about to unfold. The execution of 2nd Division Commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, Fire Fist Ace. They had also sent some spies to capture any important conversation that couldn't be heard from the live stream, either disguised as a marine or an ally of Whitebeard. Where are Katakuri and Brulee? Big Mom asked her children that were with her in a soft voice. Her eldest child, Perospero, decided to respond. They should be coming here anytime now, Mama Peroine said, Perospero informing their mother, also with a similar soft tone. As he said that, Katakuri and Brulee came walking through the doors, although Brulee's eyes were pretty red and had a face of guilt, while Katakuri also had a sorrowful look in his eyes. Katakuri gave her a pet on the shoulder as they settled down with the rest of them, although the rest of the older siblings had similar looks of guilt and sorrow in their faces. It was the same day in which it all happened. Brulee had been there when it happened. She screamed and tried to do something, but before she could, she was knocked out. She had failed. They all had failed to stop that man from taking him away from them. Some of the younger ones were confused, but the ones who heard about what had happened that day had a look of sympathy for their older siblings and were touching or holding or hugging them, in a way to support them. But out of all of them, their mother seemed to look the worst. Her hair wasn't fixed or taken care of in any way, and her eyes were pretty red from quietly crying in her bed. It had happened when 1.5 decades ago, but no matter what, she couldn't stop the nightmares that plagued her that day. It just further drove her to become more protective and caring for her children. It was the first time it had happened to her, and she damn well isn't going to let it happen twice. She was never going to lose another child again. All right, let's begin, said Tamago, looking sympathetic for the family. He had served them for a long time, and when he heard what happened, he immediately sent out search parties to see if the man was still hiding on the island, and sent several patrol ships to find a boat when she ordered him to. But they couldn't even find a trace or a hint of where he could have went and gone to. And just like that, on that day, Dragon had taken away her baby. On the screen being projected by a Den Mushy projector, now displayed Ace kneeling while, cuffed with sea stone. The fleet admiral, Sengo, was looming behind him with a Den Mushy in hand. Ace, tell me the name of your father. My father is Whitebeard. Wrong. It is. My father is Whitebeard. I have no other father. The Charlottes were intrigued right now. Why did Fire Fist Ace's father matter? Was his father someone infamous who had a big name? The next thing Sengo said silenced them all. Your mother's name is Port Gastille Rouge. She used all of her strength, and as soon as she gave birth to you, she died. I'm sure you already know who your father is. The Pirate King, Gold Roger. Silence. That was the only thing they could do. They were stunned and shocked by this revelation that Roger had a son, a fucking son this entire time. It was silent until Effiler, her fifth daughter, spoke up. Fire Fist Ace is Gold Roger's son, and it was just pure chaos after that. That guy had a child. So, Fire Fist got his strength from his father. Is he after the One Piece as well? How did no one found out till now? Were some of things the Charlottes were saying when they recovered from their shock, although some of them were still clearly taking the information that was dumped on them until Big Mom, leaning back into her chair with her head tilted and resting on her arm, made a comment. So Roger had a brat this entire time. Not only that, but he joined Newgate's crew. How ironic. And the ones who heard her couldn't help but agree and be amused at that. It was true, the son of Roger sailing under Whitebeard, a person considered to be the rival of Roger's. Roger must be crying in his grave finding out that his own son considered Whitebeard to be his one true dad rather than him. Now with the information presented to them, they were looking forward to see what comes next. After all, Whitebeard wouldn't let it slide that the Marines were trying to execute one of his sons. Maybe Whitebeard knew of Ace's lineage but didn't care. Although the Marines better be prepared. She knew that even though Whitebeard was growing old, he is still a pretty damn strong pirate that had enough power to destroy the damn place if he wishes to. She would know after sailing with him under rocks before his death. The only thing stopping him is the fact he would take out his son in doing so. A couple minutes later, and lo and behold, Whitebeard's ship came out of nowhere from below the ocean, springing out, and later on 3 more ships appearing. It seemed that all 14 commanders under Whitebeard were there to rescue Ace, which wasn't surprising. They would go hell to and back for their commander. Later on, it was one hell of a fight. The Whitebeard pirates came rushing to fight the Marines to save their brother. Big Mom was interested in the strange giant with horns, fangs, and yellow-green skin. He was definitely a giant like her, but he was clearly abnormal with his appearance, although she was later saddened by the fact he seemed to have died while reaching out towards Ace with his hand before falling. That giant must have been on really good terms with Ace. The Ice Witch, Whitey Bay, made an appearance with her ship that broke through a part of the wall and the ice made by Aokiji, which in turn made the pirates go through the opening made by Things were turning out to get more and more interesting until I knew you'd overdo it. That's because of his wink. Viry blaming this on VME. Croco. Who cares? We're gonna die. Oh, I'm made of rubber, so I'll be fine. Several figures had come falling from the sky, but the one falling faster from the sky had come into view, and the Charlottes recognized his face via the wanted poster. Isn't that? Smoothie trailed off, looking towards her siblings. Straw Hat Luffy, some of her siblings said, nodding towards her. They had heard about the boy from Lola, their sister who went out to sail to find love after turning down Loki, and their mama also turning him down because if my own child rejects you, then it's not meant to be. After that, she had gone up to their mother and told her she wanted to set sail. The siblings that were present held their breath and looked at their mother to see if she would get angry, as she had been looking forward to getting a giant to be friends with but instead rejected that offer by turning down the marriage, as Lola held no love interest towards him. Thinking that Lola had been asking for too much after the whole ordeal, their mother instead gave a soft look towards Lola while telling her to take care of herself and ordered to prepare a ship for Lola, which she beamed at. They were surprised by the turn of events but were smiling and happy for her and for their mom. Their mother was changing for the better, although it would be immediately replaced with guilt and sorrow remembering who made her better, and the fact that they couldn't find him. It frustrated them, and the one responsible for making her better was stolen from them. She would call them regularly on the snail phone to tell them what she's doing or her progress on, trying to find love. When she got rejected a couple of times, the siblings would laugh but encourage her that she would eventually find true love. When the number of rejections reached 2 digits, they were amused and teased their sister about it. When it reached 3 digits, they sweat dropped and felt a bit bad for her. They did tease her about it, but it didn't have the same strength as the previous teasings. But when it reached 4 digits, they felt nothing but sympathy for her, some even letting out a tear. Out of pity. Well, most of them. The younger ones, they couldn't help but laugh at their sister's misfortune. Lola would curse her younger siblings whenever they did and told them to wait till they get rejected when they grow up, and confess to someone, which in turn made them laugh harder like the brats they were. But when Lola stopped calling altogether for some reason, they were worried until she called back, much to their relief. Turned out she was stuck on Thriller Bark until a group of pirates saved her. Most of their siblings, mostly the older ones and the ones close to Lola, were there when Big Mom told Lola had finally called. They had talked about how she got stuck there until Big Mom asked who saved her precious love-seeking daughter. Flashback to the aftermath of Moria's defeat. Sorry, Mama, I was careless. It's fine, sweetheart. Now tell Mama who were the ones who saved you. They are the Straw Hat. Big Mom has heard about them. A rookie crew coming from the eastern seas, the weakest sea, had been appearing on the newspaper lately due to their actions like storming Ennie's lobby and even punching a celestial dragon, which takes a lot of guts, which was a surprise to her, although she never really cared about them except for some of her children. So what if they were some rookie crew coming in strong from the east? A New World pirate considered people like them a small fish in a vast ocean. What's the name of their captain? Having said all that, she was interested on who their captain was along with her children. For him to defeat Gecko Moria was an impressive feat. After all, he was the one who fought that brat of a Kid Kaido when he was younger. Seriously, she had saved him with the devil fruit she had gave him, and when God Valley came crashing down upon them and they survived with their captain dead, he just disappeared and left her. That brat owes her a pretty big debt for what she had done for him. He was defeated but still went toe-to-toe with him. After the fight with Moria's crew dead, he slacked off and used his devil fruit way more often rather than training his haki and other skills. But even still, he was pretty strong even after all this time slacking around, so for him to be beaten by some rookie pirates, this piqued her interest. His name is Luffy. Big Mom froze at that name. Mama, what's wrong? Asked Compote, her eldest daughter. The Charlottes were worried when she suddenly became silent. They got worried when their mother hadn't responded yet, which made the atmosphere tenser. Mama. This time Perospero asked with a look of worry until Big Mom said something. I was planning to name him after my previous cravings. The siblings instantly knew who she was talking about and understood. She named her children after what she was craving for during her pregnancy, which lead to names like Smoothie, Cracker, Pudding, and so on. But the name that he suggested for him, they scowled when they heard him being mentioned. Why wouldn't they be angry? He stole him from them. Was Luffy. Now they understood why she was feeling shocked. A pirate whose name was the same one that could have been their brothers, although they wondered. Could it be him? Could it be the one who they were looking for? For now, they went to their mother to comfort her, something they wouldn't dare to do years ago. But after her change, they had become closer as a family. Flashback end. Ace. Luffy shouted upon landing and spotting his older brother looking like he's been through a training session with GG. Garp, it's your family again, shouted Sengo to his closest friend. Seriously, what was up with his damn family? Luffy, Garp shouted loudly in irritation. The Charlottes were interested in this turn of events, as it was later revealed he came with several prisoners and some pretty strong pirates like Crocodile, Jinbei, Ivankov, and Buggy. When Crocodile went to strike Whitebeard, they saw Luffy went to intercept him, and Whitebeard seemed to have a conversation with Luffy. Have you come here to save your brother? That's right. Do you understand who you are up against? Someone like you doesn't stand a chance. Here. Shut up, that's not for you to decide. I know perfectly well. You want to be the king of the pirates, don't you? I am the man who will become the pirate king. Kids got balls, Oven said with a smirk, and the rest of the family agreed with him. For a rookie like himself to stand up against Whitebeard, now that takes a lot of guts. But for him to openly shout out in front of him that he will become the pirate king after Roger, now that's asking for a death wish. After that, Whitebeard laughed at the kid's claim of being the next pirate king, and Luffy charged head on to save Ace, taking out a bunch of Marines on his way until Ace told Luffy to back off. "I am your brother. Those stupid pirate rules. I've never heard of them." The Charlottes can't help but smile at this. After all, they would get frequent attacks from Marines, pirates and criminals alike. Sometimes they even went so far to attempt to steal the younger ones, but they had always been there to protect each other no matter what. One time, Amande had been walking with Poire and Galette, and when Amande let Poire out of her sight for a few seconds, she was gone. She heard a scream coming from an alley and saw some Marines that were undercover saying they would kill her in the name of justice and how she should have never been born and she was a freak because of her teeth. Amande, upon hearing and seeing this, went and dealt with them. She earned the title Demon Lady that day. Later on, when Big Mom heard about it, she cuddled and hugged Poire close, reassuring her that there was nothing wrong with her looks. That night Mama had slept with Poire, Galette and Amande, while her other children just invited themselves in after hearing what happened, and they had a massive sleepover. Thankfully Poire recovered and was smiling happily, but she seemed insecure when outside the streets and sometimes covered her teeth or closed her mouth shut, which sometimes hurts the Charlottes inside, especially Katakuri and Basskarte. They could relate, seeing how she became somewhat afraid of being judged for her teeth by the people. It's only one rookie. Don't let him dictate the entire war this way. He was raised with Ace as his stepbrother, but his actual bloodline makes him the son of the revolutionary dragon. They all froze at this. Tamago, throughout his years of service with the Charlottes, was shocked when Big Mom and her older children aged 24 and up seemed to be frozen upon hearing about the boy's father. Their faces pale and white before some of their expressions softened, and for some of their eyes either watery or shiny, and had brought their hands onto their mouths. Big Mom was shaking before she sobbed and whimpered at this before some of the older children followed, although they either openly cried or also lightly sobbed. The children who didn't know about who Dragon were confused and shocked when they saw their older siblings and their mother crying so heavily until Dragon, Dolce said, tilting his head towards his elder siblings. He and his brother had heard about that man from listening in on one of his siblings' conversation by being above them with their balloons. They always had looks of frustration, grief, and guilt. "Wasn't that guy?" Draghi trailed off. "The bastard who stole our brother." Brulee scowled heavily while subconsciously using her devil fruit and causing all the mirrors in the room to shake. That was one of her biggest failures that had weighed heavily upon her shoulders throughout her life. She couldn't stop the one responsible from taking away their baby brother, who upon seeing their mother smiled brightly like the sun and beamed at her, their baby brother, who single-handedly changed their mother for the better, their baby brother who upon seeing her didn't cry like how her siblings did when they saw her when they were babies, but instead smiled at her, their baby who was stolen by that son of a bitch dragon. Broy and Katakuri immediately went to comfort her, although they had a dark look on their face, being reminded of that man who had stolen the one who made Mama better and made Brulee feel somewhat better about the scar. Although all of the older siblings had similar looks of hatred and anger when Brulee spoke of him. "If they get their hands on him." "Stole our brother?" Normand, the 38th daughter, one of the youngest, asked. She didn't know about the fact that she had another older brother but was stolen from birth. "Have you ever wondered why sometimes we said Ewan was one of two and he could have had a twin?" Smoothie said. She remembered that moment. She was around 16 years old at that time, but she was there when it happened. She was one of the older ones who were part of the search parties while the younger ones stayed. They looked everywhere for him. The memories burned fresh seeing the man wearing a cloak with a visible red tattoo going over his eye with their brother in hand. That night none of the younger siblings could sleep as they were worried about what has happened to the newborn, while the older siblings had been looking throughout the entire damn place, island, and around the sea. The younger ones, especially Ewan himself, was interested in this. They had always heard how some of their older siblings sadly talked about how there was supposed to be another child. Besides Ewan, they wanted to ask, but they didn't seem to want to talk about it. When they asked Mama, she would twitch or even flinch at the mention of this and said she would explain when they were older. Big Mom, with a deep breath to compose herself after hearing the information, although she wanted to cry more. Years of not knowing whether her baby boy was dead or alive until he was there at Marineford, where Sengo revealed his biological father. She looked at her children and explained. "Monkey D. Dragon 17 years ago gave me a child. During that time I was already pregnant with Ewan, his birth being just a few months away from him, so in a way they were sort of twins. Big Mom gripped her hand tightly, her nails digging into her palm, causing her to bleed a bit. She was reminiscing about that day. Upon her children seeing this, the ones closest to her held her arm in a supporting manner and gave her worried and reassuring looks, which she was mentally thanking them for. Even her 3-homeless maid from her soul was shooting a concerned look over her when she talked about him. After all, Zeus, Napoleon, and Prometheus were there when Big Mom cried and wailed for her baby on that day. They tried to comfort her in any way they could, which she was grateful for. She took a deep breath and had a soft but a regretful and guilty look in her eyes before continuing on. During that time before Luffy was born, I was not exactly the best mother. She looked away from them in shame and guilt, but could feel how her children's arms and hands held hers tighter, remembering on how she neglected her children's problem when she should have been paying more attention. She could feel Mother Caramel shoot a look of disappointment towards Linlin. After all, her dream was to make a land where all races can be together and live in peace and happily. How could she achieve that when she couldn't even make her own children happy? How could she have not seen her children's problem and insecurities? But when Luffy was born, he did something that had me thinking very deeply about. She looked back towards her children, but more focused on the ones who were there when she had given birth to Luffy. They were looking towards each other at first before looking back at their mother in curiosity. They had always wondered what Mama thought about during her time with their newborn brother and what the baby did to move her so emotionally. The younger ones more intrigued and leaning forward to hear what happened on that day. He looked at me, gave me his biggest grin, and laughed. Big Mom trailed off her gaze far away, remembering that moment when her Luffy had given him such an innocent and bright look that had changed her. It felt as if I was holding the sun in my hands. It was purely warm and comfort. Big Mom finished off with a soft but sad smile. When I looked at him, I remembered about Mother Caramel and how she took care of me and the other orphans. Then I started remembering about how I had my own adorable, cute, and innocent children. Big Mom softly chuckled when she saw the older ones had a look of embarrassment, their grip on her faltering, but they composed themselves a few seconds later but were still blushing on what she said, although they were internally happy about this. The younger ones just snickering and giggling at their older siblings, in which they responded with the stink eye. Then I remembered about how I treated you all. When she said that, her arm was shaking a bit from having a flashback towards how she acted towards her children, how cold and cruel she was. When Brulee had gotten a scar, she waved it off as some fight between bigger kids. When Katakuri covered his face, she had encouraged it rather than reassuring he looked fine with his teeth. Sometimes she would even insult them on how they look. She was in a trance until she felt how her children held until her more firmly, giving her a look of worry. She calmed down before continuing. Then I realize what I have done to you all, she said shakily, her eyes starting to become watery as she looked at the ones she were talking about, and they shot back a look of forgiveness, and in turn she lifted her arms slowly, making the ones holding onto her to let go, and she brought them close to hug them. She was quietly whispering to all her children, but they could hear her mutter soft words of apologies and how much she loved them. They could hear their older siblings responding with "It's fine and you have become betters" and other positive comments, which she started to smile softly at. After a moment of silence, she continued, "And that's when I noticed all of you peeking." She chuckled softly at that, the ones who had been there also softly chuckling and giggling at the memory. And that was the day when it happened. Big Mom sat solemnly with a grim face that was mimicked by everyone who was also there. The worst event that happened in their lives. Flashback 17 years ago, Luffy's birth. Big Mom's pov. "What have I done?" I muttered softly while letting out a single tear. I couldn't help but feel like utter shit after realizing what I have done to my own children. I couldn't hold it in and started to sob quietly. The way he smiled hit me with a sense of nostalgia. I remembered all the good times I had at the orphanage and how I wanted to make an island with people from different races or had traits that made them stand out. I wanted people like them to live together in peace without discrimination or harm. How could I achieve that when I couldn't even do that with my own children? Mother Caramel wouldn't do this. Creek. I looked towards the door and saw my children peeking, probably to see who their brother was. What caught my eyes and my heart were how they looked at me. They looked afraid, tense and scared. I noticed how they were staring at me as if I was gonna murder them. I couldn't help but felt something stuck in my throat. I was disgusted with myself. My own children fear me and see me as nothing more as a monster rather than a mother. What have I become? When I raised my hand to wave them over katakuri, Perospero and Compote had immediately went in front and was standing in a way that looked like they were protecting the others who looked worried and afraid for their elder brothers and sister who covered them. How far had I fallen till the point they had to be on guard all the time from their own mother? I signaled them in a way to come closer and saw they were hesitant at first to come near me, but they did it slowly, and each step they took I could hear some of them taking deep breaths and were shaking and trembling a bit until they came up to my foot. I really messed it up, didn't I? But even so, I can't just drown in my guilt. No, that wouldn't change anything. I will become a better mother for them. After thinking about my new goal, I looked at my children and smiled softly at them, like when I first had Perospero, when I had Compote, when I first had my triplets, when I had my snake quadruplets. When I was better than this. I lowered my arm to show them their new baby brother. Brulee hesitantly but slowly approached him to get a closer look, and when they made eye contact, he laughed and beamed at Brulee. She was stunned, but that quickly shifted to sobs, but she had a smile on her face which I can't help but make me smile wider at. Most of my children, when they were babies and saw Brulee, they would cry. It had saddened Brulee, and normally when the younger children grew up, they hadn't met Brulee until later on, because they were afraid of her appearance, but their newborn brother wasn't bothered by her and seemed to take joy in her presence. I noticed my older children were worried when she started to cry, but when they saw her crying in joy, they smiled warmly at this, knowing how their younger children were afraid of her when they were still toddlers. When they turned to look at their baby brother, he also beamed at them in happiness, which they smiled warmly at. It felt nice. Brulee wiped her tears and looked at me and asked, "What's his name?" I put him back in his crib and rubbed my chin in thought. Honestly, I haven't figured it out yet. I didn't mention the fact that Dragon asked me to name our child Luffy, but with the things that were happening, I just put that thought away. I looked towards my children. "Gather all of the family into my bedroom. I need to talk with you all about something." They gulped and seemed to have swallowed a lump in their throat before Katakuri and Perospero responded, "Why yes, Mama," and they left to gather their siblings. I took a glance at the baby. He looked at me with worry before I smiled at him, and he smiled back. I chuckled softly. Honestly, he truly is beyond precious. Thank you for opening my eyes, for being a light in the darkness. I left the room and went towards the throne room to talk to them. In Big Mom's bedroom. Big Mom opened the bedroom door and saw all her children gathered around in a circle, and any small talk they were having were immediately cut off when they noticed their mother's presence. They were tense and worried if their mom was going to punish them or hit them for making a mistake or any other punishment if they did something that displeased her. Expecting a look that promised pain and fury, they saw her looking at them with an unreadable expression. She walked closer towards them before she started looming above them, the Charlottes holding onto each other, preparing for the worst. They were unexpectedly swooped up from the ground, and she held them close to her chest. They were too stunned to speak. She went and got onto her bed before putting all her children onto her lap. The Charlottes saw how she was biting her lips before something hit them. They were soaked in water, but it was salty. The Charlottes hesitantly looked up and saw something that shocked them. Tears could be seen in her eyes. Their mother was crying, and she looked like she was trying to say something, but every time she would bite her lips and sob harder until it went from whimpering to quiet sobbing. They couldn't move, they couldn't speak or do anything. How could they? They never saw their mother like this. They were stuck like this for a full minute before stopped crying and was now whimpering. Amande, hesitant at first to speak for a few seconds, called out to her, "Mama, I'm sorry." They heard someone mutter, but it sounded like their mother, but she wouldn't say something like that. But looking around, they knew, even though it was hard to comprehend, their mother apologize. When Amande heard this, she was a bit confused and shocked. I'm sorry." This time they saw their mother actually said it. They were again left speechless at this. Their mother, who acted so cold and so mean to them, was apologizing. This was the first time they saw her in such a state. "Sorry for what, Mama?" Amande questioned again, confused. Why would she apologize? Normally they were the ones apologizing when they did something bad. I'm sorry for what I have done to you. I'm sorry I couldn't have been better to all of you. I am sorry." They couldn't believe it. Their mother was crying and apologizing. They looked at each other with hopeful eyes. Could their mother actually be changing for the better? If so, then why? Although they were panicking, trying to calm down, This wasn't like her hunger pangs or burst of anger and rage. They weren't prepared to deal with something like this, so they could only hold onto their mother's hands as a way of support until she calmed down. And when she did, she looked at them with conviction. "I swear that I will do better from now on, not for my own sake, but for your own." Big Mom said softly, but yet sounded and looked determined, but they could also see a soft, maternal look in her eyes before she continued. "All of you are precious to me, none of you can be replaced." The Charlottes blushes in embarrassment at this. Even if it was such an emotional moment, they can't help but be embarrassed, but they were happy and some even smiling. Mama, what made you want to change?" Daifuku asked in curiosity. He hadn't seen their mother like this since him and his brothers were born, and judging by his brothers and younger siblings' looks, they too were curious what brought upon the change. "Your newborn brother had me thinking, he's gonna grow up to be someone kind-hearted and has a smile that can challenge the sun," their mother said, and they had to agree. It felt warm and nice when they saw his smile. The Charlottes vowed to make his life enjoyable and memorable when he's growing up with them. They owed him a debt after all. He sure was something else, to change their mother with just a smile. They can't wait to watch him grow up. The next moments they decided to have some nice family talk until they heard crying coming from the nursery. Must have either been Ewan or their newborn brother. Brulee went to check up and see if what was wrong. They continued their conversation until they heard a scream coming from the nursery. Surprised and tensed, the Charlottes immediately went to the nursery, Katakuri being further ahead of them and had a worried look in his eyes, although his facial expression was somewhat covered up with his scarf. Roy was right behind him, also very worried about her twin. He was the first to get there, and he looked stunned and was still, the rest of the siblings, and eventually their mother caught up to him and saw a sight that froze their blood. There lying on the floor was Brulee, knocked out unconscious, while a man was standing on the window with Ewan crying in his crib. But what caught their attention and made them freeze up was what he was holding. He had their baby brother in his hand. Before they could do anything, thunder struck, and they caught a glimpse of the man, and they instantly knew. After all, it was his most distinct feature, the tribal marking on his face, and after that, nothing. He had disappeared, along with their brother. Quickly gather a search party. Get every available ships out to sea. Find that bastard. Find Dragon. Get him back. Their mother immediately snapped out of it and ordered. Without asking any questions, they immediately followed orders, while the younger ones also were tempted to go but were told to stay put due to not being trained yet. They can't let him get away. They mustn't let him disappear. They vowed to be there for him. They can't let him be separated from them. But Atlas, after several hours of searching through every island near Toto Land and around the sea with Morndior commanding and instructing them, they came back, the younger ones with their mother with them, were impatient, trying to prepare for the worst news, but nothing could. Then the doors opened. The older siblings slowly approached them with an unreadable expression on their face before Katakuri, Brulee, Perospero, Compote, Amande, Smoothie approached them. Smoothie let out a few tears, followed by her older siblings before it turned into sobbing. The servants with them had grim looks in their face, and they knew they had lost their brother. Dragon had gotten away. That day was the day all the Charlottes, with their mother hugging them, cried for hours, days, and weeks without end. Flashback end. The younger ones had tears in their eyes. They couldn't believe something like that happened. But before they could respond, Compote, wide-eyed, staring at the screen after composing herself, said one thing that got all their attention, and they paled when they saw what had her attention on the screen. Luffy. He was facing all three admirals alone at Marineford. Quite an entrance, son of dragon. This youngster sure is scary. If nothing else, I praise your tenacity. But you're not ready for this stage yet. Give Ace back, Luffy shouted at the three admirals. Kizaru had flashed in front of Luffy when he flashed past them, preparing to kick him. But Luffy did something they did not expect. Get out of my way. Luffy shouted with a blackened fist, sending Kizaru plummeting into the ground and knocking him out. He was too surprised to defend himself. Busoshoku, haki. Akainu and Aokiji were stunned. He knew how to use armament haki. A haki user from East Blue. The weakest sea. Sengo, upon seeing this, ordered the executioner to execute Ace. Luffy screamed for Ace, but just as they were about to, sand had hit them. Crocodile had intervened. Luffy took this chance to run towards Ace, but was intercepted by Aokiji throwing an icicle at him. Luckily, it only threw him back a bit. Thank God he learned about armament haki from Shanks, Oars. brought the Moby Dick into the wall and the Whitebeard pirates had flooded in, but Luffy didn't care about that. He had to save Ace. With the help of Ivankov clearing the way, he had to face Kobe, who he quickly dealt with, until they raised the blades upon Ace. Luffy, upon seeing this, decided to say one simple thing that knocked out a few of the pirates and half of the Marines. Stop. Upon saying that, the executioners, Marines, and pirates went unconscious. The ones who were conscious were surprised. Ace's brother had just used Conqueror's haki like he did, although Ace was smiling a bit. After all, he was taught by Luffy about haki thanks to him being taught by Shanks. Sengo saw this and raised an eyebrow. What are you smiling about? Ace responded, looking back at him with a smirk. Oh, nothing, it's just that my younger brother is a lot stronger than you think and he isn't happy about what you guys did to me. You are beyond screwed. Which had Sengo eyes narrowed, stronger than him. Ace was the second commander of Whitebeard, which meant he was pretty damn strong, but his little brother was stronger than him. Little did Sengo know that Luffy, due to Garp's insane training with Shanks' guidance, he was gonna be the biggest obstacle, second to Whitebeard. At Totoland, the family were stunned at first, but they cheered for what their brother did. He had punched an admiral and he used Conqueror's haki. Besides their mom, Katakuri was the only one who had it, but just as the executioners were about to kill Ace, which had them tensed and sweating, they didn't want Luffy to lose a person he considered a brother. Worry turned into shock when Luffy shouted and the Marines fell and went unconscious. He has Conqueror's haki like Katakuri. Flamp shouted, surprised, putting next to her head. All three eyes wide at his display of haki. The Charlottes now leaned forward and, focusing on what their brother would do, they also asked Tamago to order the chefs to prepare beverages, sweets, and especially popcorn. This was gonna be one hell of a fight. At Marineford, Akainu eyes narrowed. Conqueror's haki, to think he was born with it, but it's to be expected. From the son of evil. Aokiji let out a sweat while talking to himself. Oh, are you serious? Kizaru had gotten up from the impact and saw what had happened. That surprised me. Although he was no longer smiling. All three admirals glanced at each other before rushing to attack Luffy. They couldn't let him get away. He was a D who has Conqueror's haki and armament also. He was going to be a sure danger in a future. They had to take him out along with Fire Fist Ace before they could grow. Now, Luffy, upon seeing this, just grinned ferally with a sinister glint in his eyes. Bring it. Hardening his left hand, he put his mouth onto it and he inflated it. Muscle balloon. And said one thing that had Ace grinning at. He was gonna use it. Gear forth. Chapter 3. Upon saying this, his body had inflated, symbols appearing and expanding on his chest with smoke blocking his figure until it disappeared, and reviewed his new look. Bounce man. Akainu scoffed. What is this, a joke? Kizaru amused but seemed to be on guard. He sure got big. Luffy, I am serious, said Luffy. You can't even stand straight. You're bouncing because you're rubber. Aokiji said. Shut up, you guys won't be able to do anything against me. Luffy said, winding up his fist. At Toto Land. That's interesting, Smoothie said, crossing her legs and leaned forward in anticipation. What was special about this technique their brother was displaying? It seems to be a combination of armament and his devil fruit. Cracker said, interested in his brother's next move. He sure is bouncing a lot, commented Compot with a sweat drop, while her siblings who were around her agreed. He got big, Custard said in surprise. Cracker grinned. Ha ha ha, that's what she sigh. Asterisk whack asterisk. Before he could finish what he was saying, Angel had smacked him in the head. What are those markings, though? Poire asked while tilting her head. Tamago, after this war is over, get the information of his devil fruit, Big Mom asked of him. Wondering what he could do in such a form. He could inflate and seems to be able to stretch, which hints at a paramecia, which is related to rubber. But this form he took on, there was steam around his body that looked akin to robes, his eyes shaded, markings of some sorts on his chest. It seemed like he was a paramecia, but this form looked more like a mythical Zoan of some kind. Big Mom shrugged of her thoughts. She should be focusing what her son was gonna do right now. The Charlottes now leaned forward and wondering what their brother would do. At Marineford, Luffy was bouncing a few times, winding up his hands, and had a look of concentration, and after a bounce, he went for Aokiji. Gomu Gomu Eno, fist cranked up back into his arm. Aokiji surprised but was able to raise his arms to try defend himself. Kong gun. He was immediately sent flying and crashed into the headquarters. The people who were watching were stunned. The Marines were terrified, but the pirates cheered on. Girarara. So it is true. Whitebeard laughed out loud. Ace had told Whitebeard about how ridiculously strong Luffy was and how he trained him on how to use haki. Marco along with his brothers were confused and turned their head towards their father figure. What's true? Whitebeard grinned. Ace had told me about how insanely strong his brother was. He even taught him armament haki, and when he found out about how Ace had conquerors, he taught him that also. They were stunned. Ace learned from his little brother about haki. But that would imply. Any pops, how old was Luffy when he taught Ace? Oh, he was around 6 to 7 years old around that time when he taught him haki. The commanders, their allies and Marines who were near them heard what he said, and they had their jaws dropped at that. First he was revealed to be the son of Dragon, then it was revealed he could use haki. Especially conquerors, and now he overpowered an admiral with ease with a single punch. But not only that, but he learned haki AT6. What the fuck is up with that? Brat. They were afraid to even think about the fact if he had other siblings. He was the brother of ACE. Was there an older brother or sister of his who was also stupidly strong? And they haven't even gotten to his mother, but they didn't want to. It would be too much to handle if it was revealed to be a big shot. At Toto Land, the Charlottes were surprised but smiled at what he had done, the younger ones cheering him on. Big Mom was just beaming with pride on how strong her son was. She can't wait to get Luffy back to them. What strength, Fa? Opera said with his 4 brothers nodding dumbfounded. They had noticed how their spy had seemed to be pick up whatever Whitebeard and his sons had been talking about. Ace had told me about how insanely strong his brother was. He even taught him armament haki, and when he found out about how Ace had conquerors, he taught him that. Also, any pops, how old was Luffy when he taught Ace? Oh, he was around 6 to 7 years old around that time when he taught him haki. The Charlottes who were eating and drinking did a spit take or choked. He was 6. Cracker, Custard and Angel said in unison. Sister Breath. Broy said, patting the back of Brulee who choked. She hadn't eaten anything. When the revelation came, everyone had looks of surprise. Sure, Katakuri had conquerors, but he was around 14 or so when he had unlocked it. He sure is something else, ain't he? Smoothie said, smirking proudly of her brother's power. Everyone nodded in agreement at that. At Marineford, Kizaru and Akainu had their guard up and were tense. They shouldn't have underestimated this. Brat, they kept staring at him with their guards up until he disappeared. Gomu no. Before Akainu could react, he was blasted off. Rhino Schneider Luffy kicked Akainu off into a far distance. Kizaru upon seeing this flashed far away to cover distance. Yasakani Sacred Jewel. A yellow beam had hit and exploded upon impact. When it hit him, there was a lot of smoke created. Sengo upon seeing this had a poker face, although it seemed he was satisfied about what he saw while Garp gritted his teeth. But Sengo noticed how Ace still was grinning as if nothing happened. Why are you still smiling? Your brother could be dead. Ace just kept his grin and looked at Sengo. Well, it's simple. Gomu no. My little brother, Culverin, can't be defeated that easily. Kizaru upon seeing this flashed away and saw how he was open, a chance to strike back. He flashed and kicked Luffy with a devil fruit-infused kick, but it did nothing. It felt like rubber. Armored but still rubbery. Kizaru was shocked. I told you already, you won't be able to do anything against me. Luffy just bounced off his kick. Kizaru flashed away. You can't get away from me. Luffy shouted. Kizaru noticed that previous attack was still coming from him. He flashed, but it was still stretching. Keep going after him. Python. It kept stretching further and further. He flashed, but it stretched further. He flashed again, but it stretched further. How far can it stretch? Enough. Kizaru flashed again, but faced towards the incoming fist this time. Just fall already. Yasakani Sacred Jewel. Gomu no. Both attacks impacted, but Luffy overpowered his. Kizaru gaped and was surprised at this, and before he could react, the fist collided with his face. Culverin. He was immediately sent crashing down into the ground, creating a deep hole. Luffy, not being able to withstand his form anymore, reverted back to normal. Damn, can't use haki for the next 15 minutes. Luffy, seeing how he wasn't blocked, smiled. He had a clear opening. I am coming to save you. Ace. Luffy shouted while smiling, and he booked it towards Ace. The surrounding pirates and marines alike were open-mouthed and had stopped fighting once they saw what Ace's brother did. He was a rookie. From East Blue. Since when did that sea had a monster like him? to single-handedly defeat the three admirals like that. Whitebeard just laughed in approval of what he did. This brat could do it. He may take after. Roger. Jinbei was impressed and had gained massive respect for Luffy. To think Ace's brother was that strong. Crocodile just smirked. Had a gut feeling that brat was interesting. Garp was surprised. Since when was he that strong? Why couldn't he had been a marine? Ace smiled and laughed. Why AC that Sabo? Our brother absolutely kicked ass. Boa Hancock was wild. She was being Boa Hancock. The Whitebeard commanders smiled. Block of the Marines from reaching Ace's little brother. Izo commanded. Yeah. Toto land. The older ones were shocked but were amazed and impressed by what he did. Way to go. Luffy. The younger ones were very amazed and were awed and had stars in their eyes. Their older brother was strong. Big Mom was proud and beamed at what Luffy did. That's my son. Katakuri was smirking underneath his scarf. He was interested in having a spar with him when they get him back in their family's embrace. The Charlottes were cheering on what their brother did. He had beaten the three admirals so easily. The older ones were simply proud and amazed at what he did. Some even has stars in their eyes, Brulee and Effiler being the most prominent, while the younger ones had cheered on when they saw their brother did that. He's so strong and cool. Effiler turned pointed at Luffy on the screen and turned towards her three other sisters. His so cool. With a big grin on her face with stars in her, Hachi snorted, Mondi giggled and Amande smirked while ruffling her hair. She looked like a kid after getting a bowl of candy. Big Mom simply smiled warmly at the screen while letting out a tear. Luffy, you have really grown stronger, haven't you? She couldn't be any more prouder of what her son had become. Her blood was strong in him. At Marine Ford. The execution platform is right front of Vu's, Straw Hat Boy. Ivankov had stepped to the side and would intervene if he saw Luffy struggling. He wanted to see what the son of his boss could do. The answer. A lot. V really is Dragon's son. That strength, were his thoughts. Just keep running straight ahead. Yeah. Luffy noticed someone with scissors running by him. Crab-chan. Inazuma had carved up the ground that reached the platform. The Marines were panicking. He's got a clear path. He's heading straight for the execution platform. A rear admiral tried to command, get to him. We can't, we are being held off. At Toto land. Get him. Free Ace. Some of the Charlottes shouted, cheering their brother on. At Marine Ford. The Whitebeard pirates had made a clear opening and making sure to maintain it. Ace's brother. Keep running forward. And Luffy did just that. Some high-ranking Marines appeared in front of him to try and stop him, only to be stomped away when he inflated his leg and slammed it on them. More Marines were trying to rush towards Straw Hat but couldn't. The pirates were holding them at bay. Stop, Straw Hat. Go, Straw Hat. Free Ace. Kizaru had recovered and tried to fire a beam at Luffy, only to be hit by Whitebeard. He couldn't dodge after being hit by his fist. It really had weakened him. Luffy, now running up towards Ace via the path made by Crab-chan, smiled. He was so close. Here I come, Ace. But sadly it wasn't over yet. One more obstacle had jumped in front of him. The hero of the Navy. Garp. His Jiji. Upon landing he had stomped on the platform, making it slowly break. He had to be quick before it breaks apart. There's no way I'll step aside. I am a Vice Admiral from Navy HQ. If you want to get past me, then do it over my dead body. Straw Hat. Luffy. Luffy gaped in surprise before gritting his teeth. He knew what he had to do. He had to get past him. He had to beat Jiji. The platform broke even more and everyone was tense. Do something, Straw Hat Boy. If you don't act fast, the bridge will fall. Ivankov said, some pirates even shouting his name in worry. Could he do it? At Toto land. That's. Oven perked up at who was blocking the way. If it was him it would be a problem. Monkey D. Garp, hero of the Marines, Luffy's grandfather too. Big Mom answered her son, although she and her children were worried. Their mother had told tales of her times during being a Rocks pirates and how Garp had chased them and was able to beat them with Roger's help. They were worried. Could he do it? At Marine Ford. Garp reminded Luffy again, I've told you already. If you want to get past me, then it'll be over my dead body. Luffy gritted his teeth, more reminiscent about his Jiji before snapping out of it. His face hardened. He had seen into the future and saw what his Jiji would say. Luffy, I now regard you as my enemy. Garp wind up his fist to go in for a punch, but sadly, he remembered about Luffy when he was a child and he faltered. Taking this opportunity, Luffy wind up his own one and punched Garp out of the way, screaming. He immediately plummeted into the ground, although he had a resigned face in doing so. He took that hit willingly. Sengo had noticed this. You play the parent after all. Garp, Kizaru panting, looked onwards. Looks like he's gonna make it to the execution platform. And he did. Luffy had done it. Ace was stunned at the sight of Luffy in front of him standing on the platform. He did it. Luffy smiled at Ace upon landing on his execution platform. I finally made it. Ace was gaping a bit at the sight, Luffy. And then he smiled softly. You always were ridiculously strong. Luffy went to Ace Cuff and finding his key in his pocket while Sengo hardened his expression and started to glow. He was using his devil fruit. A marine commented about it. Look, Fleet Admiral Sengo is using his ability. Luffy, just as he was about to unlock it with the key, had it shot off with an icicle. Aokiji had recovered, although was bleeding from his head, panting heavily. The key. The Marines, upon seeing this, aimed at the platform. AIM. Now, as brothers, I will execute you myself. Sengo exclaimed, bring his fist down upon them. But before he could, Luffy had cushioned it. He had inflated it while Galdino, disguised as an executioner, built a wax cover to cover him and Ace. The impact caused the scaffolding to fall. We are falling, Galdino exclaimed. Luffy was surprised. Don't worry, I will make a key. Those shackles will be off in no time. Luffy nodded at this. Fire. Blast them with the platform. The Marines had several cannons and guns, aimed and fired at their direction. Galdino finished making the key. Save your brother. Straw Hat. I am on it. Asterisk boom, asterisk. The cannonballs had exploded on them. Everyone was tense. Did we get them? Luffy. Ace. All three of them were hit. Everyone was waiting for the smoke from the explosion to dissipate. At Totoland. Luffy. The Charlottes exclaimed, shocked and worried if their brother had done it. The smoke was obscuring their bodies. Big Mom had clung onto his chairs while the siblings held onto each other for support just in case the worst happens. They waited and waited until shackles have came falling down. The shackles, they thought, that would mean. At Marineford. Everyone was tense until asterisk thud asterisk. The shackles, the Marines and pirates exclaimed. They came off. The Marines dreaded while the pirates were slowly starting to smile until flames burst out of the smoke. In the shape of Whitebeard's Jolly Roger. Honestly, you never had change, have ya? Luffy. Ace grinned at his brother and his brother beamed back. He did it. Ace. Always doing the impossible as if it were obvious, and doing the dumbest things. Ace said. Seriously, his brother always defied his expectations in every way possible, but that's how his brother was. He really was something else. Luffy just laughed at that. He always made Ace dumbstruck when he was able to beat strong people as if they were nothing back when they were living with Deiden. If only Sabo were here. The Marines had sweated and gritted their teeth upon seeing this fire fist. Ace has been freed. The pirates cheered and smiling brightly in approval of what they are seeing. He did it. When Marines aimed their weapons prepared to fire at Ace, he had obliterated them with a fire fist. Upon landing they were on guard, arms raised. They were going to get out of her alive. Any Luffy? Luffy chirped back in response. Arigato. Any Luffy just grinned in response. Shishishishi. Of course. We are brothers, we will always be there for each other. Luffy exclaimed, which had Ace smile wider at. Let's get out of here, Luffy shouted. Yeah, Ace responded. At Toto Land. Luffy did it. The Charlottes cheered on when it was revealed that their brother freed Ace, a person Luffy considered a brother. Now all they need to do is escape. At Marineford. They sure are lively. Jozu exclaimed, the other division commanders with him smiling at the sight. Ace's brother did it. His free. Clear a path for Ace and Straw Hat to escape. Haruto ordered. Yeah. Ace and Luffy sprinted towards the Whitebeard pirates, Luffy throwing several fists and kicks, whacking the Marines away while Ace was burning and roasting them. They tried to shoot them, but they either went through Ace or deflected right back at them after shooting Straw Hat. Ace, running with Luffy, side by side, looked at Luffy smiling and made a declaration. Any Luffy someday, I will beat you. Shishishishi, sure. I will be waiting. It was going good until Aokiji came blocking their way. Ace smirked and put his hands in front of Luffy. Any Luffy, let me handle this one. Sure. Luffy responded, stepping back. Pheasant beak. Kayu-kan. The two attacks collided with each other, both cancelling each other out. Luffy ordered this, you have gotten stronger, Ace. Ace smiled back, thanks Luffy. At Toto Land. for Ace to counter an Admiral Aokja's attack. Oven said, he wondered if his heat fruit is strong enough to counter that ice. It's to be expected. He's the second commander of Whitebeard after all Snack said, which had all the siblings agreeing with. To be the second division commander of Whitebeard, you have got to be strong. At Marineford. Asterisk smack asterisk. Fleet Admiral. What a disgrace, how could have let them get away? Sengo exclaimed. Admiral Sakazuki. Are you all right, sir? He was in bad shape. Luffy's kick may have broken a couple of his bones. I will not let them get away from here. Squadro had tried sacrificing himself, but Whitebeard had stopped his ship, not wanting to see his son sacrifice himself for his foolishness, and gave an order. His final order. Listen up. We have completed our objective here. We no longer have any business here. The order I am about to give will be my final orders as your captain. At this the commanders and allies were shocked. His final order? This is where we will be parting all of you. Make sure you survive and reunite with each other in the new world. His sons were in disbelief and in denial over this. Pops, what do you mean? We can still make it back. Yeah. I am the one at the top of this era. There is no ship to carry me in the new era. Exclaimed Whitebeard, bringing his fist down, taking a handful of Marines. Whitebeard. Sengo shouted, damn, that bastard is planning to bring Marineford down with him while the others escape. Osen. Oyaji. Luffy and Ace exclaimed. They couldn't believe it. The era is changing, Whitebeard thought. It all started on that sea. Whitebeard took a deep breath before proceeding to buy time for his sons to get out of here. Now let's settle this. Whitebeard continued destroying and absolutely going all out on Marineford. At Toto Land. Edward. Big Mom muttered. She knew Newgate was going to sacrifice himself for the sake of his son's escape from Marineford. She was a bit sad though. A Rocks pirate shouldn't be killed by something like that. Rocks pirates can only be killed by a Rocks pirate. Only Kaido, herself and Shiki could kill him, and they also are the only ones allowed to kill her. But she understands that he won't be able to last longer. Even old age wasn't avoidable for the strongest man. Farewell. Edward Newgate, you were a nice drinking buddy. At Marineford. Some of the pirates were on board of the ship to escape, but some couldn't. How could they leave their old man behind? They let out tears, pleading their captain to come with them, but he stood his ground and told them. It was captain's order. Most of them obeyed with heavy hearts, while the others didn't want to leave but were dragged into the ship. Although they couldn't blame them, they wanted Pops to come with them. But it was his final orders. Ace just stood looking at Whitebeard in disbelief while he swung his weapon upon those approaching to stop his sons from escaping. Ace attacked some Marines before he reached to his father figure, with Ace holding on to Luffy. Whitebeard stopped attacking, sensing his son and turning around to face him. There's no need for words, just answer a question for me, Ace. Was I a good father? Ace clung until Luffy tightly and looked at his father into his eyes. Of course, Dad. Whitebeard smiled softly and looked at Luffy and was silently communicating through eye contact. They both nodded and Luffy grabbed Ace and booked it to the ship. Whitebeard turned towards the Marines, feeling fulfilled by Ace's answer. He started wreaking havoc and letting loose. They were running towards the ship with Jinbei behind them, while the Marines were trying to gun them down. Keep going forward. Ace-kun. Luffy-kun. Yeah. They were close to the ship until. Do you really think I will let you run away? After all, Whitebeard is nothing but a loser from a dead era. Ace stopped and turned towards the bastard who said that. It was Akainu. Take back what you said. His ship brothers tried to convince him to go back to the ship, but he didn't listen, although they couldn't blame him. They wanted to kill that bastard who would dare insult their father. Your father, Gold Roger, conquered the entire Grand Line. What is Whitebeard, when compared to that? Akainu was smirking arrogantly. He was agitating Ace. He also noticed the other commanders and pirates twitching or glaring at him. Ace in response burned brighter and his scowl deepening. At Toto Land. That man, he's trying to agitate him. Katakuri stated. Underneath his scarf he was frowning. He didn't like what Akainu was trying to do. To use such an underhanded technique. His playing dirty. Smoothie scowled. She may have been a pirate, but that was pretty low of him. The Charlottes didn't like one bit what Akainu was trying to pull here. At Marineford. I mean, did he even have the guts to fight against Roger? In other words, Whitebeard is a dash. Gear second. Everyone looked at Luffy and saw how he had a similar face like Ace. Take back what you said about Ace's Ossen. Luffy shouted. Ace powered down and looked at his brother with a soft look. Luffy. Akainu focused on Luffy this time. Why should I? I'm just speaking the truth. He's a big low dash. Akainu was cut off when Luffy appeared in front of him with his hand covered in haki. 15 minutes passed after Gear 4. He could use haki again. Akainu raised his arms to his head and chest. You won't catch me off guard. Mugiwara. Akainu exclaimed mentally. Gomu Gomu no. Akainu noticed Straw Hat wasn't aiming for his head. In fact, he was aiming lower, but before he could do anything. Pistol. With hands covered in haki, he had delivered a devastating blow towards Akainu that made him kneel and screech in extreme pain. He had punched Akainu in the dick. A haki-coated punch. To the dick. Yikes. At Toto Land. Yago Luffy, the female Charlottes including Big Mom herself, cheered. He deserved that. The male Charlottes were pale and white from what their brother did. A haki-coated punch to the dick. Some could feel the phantom pain. Some even felt a bit of sympathy for him. Some prayed. Rip Akainu's children. At Marineford. The Marines upon seeing this winced and could feel the impact. That's a lot of damage. That's what you get for badmouthing the Ossen. Luffy exclaimed. Ha 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 ha, that's what you get for talking shit, you fuck. Ace taunted. Akainu with the biggest shit-eating grin of all time with a middle finger pointing at him. He had taught Luffy from a young age to hit people there if they said strange things about his rubber powers. Damn pedophiles going after cute boys, especially his cute, innocent, naive little brother, or acted mean and horrible to other people and him. Makino scolded him for that. He didn't tell her the reason, he kind of forgot. But seeing Akainu kneeling on the ground in pain, it was worth it. Mako approached Luffy with a smile, enjoying Akainu's suffering. Any Luffy right? Mako called out to Luffy, who chirped back in response and turned his head towards him. Thanks for doing that to him, Mako smirked to Luffy, which he returned. The Whitebeard pirates were smiling at Luffy for what he did, and also wincing when they say how much strength he put into that. Except for their only sister Whitey, who was laughing from afar, witnessing the whole thing happen. And also laughing at Akainu's misery. That's what you get for talking bad about our old man. Mugiwara. Luffy. Thanks for doing that for the old man. Way to go, Aces. Brother. Don't talk bad about our old man. Thanks, Luffy. Were some of the things the pirates were saying. Grateful that Ace's brother did that to him. Luffy just laughed at all of this. Mako looked at Whitebeard before letting out some tears and shouted towards his brothers, farewell. Oyaji. Everyone, let's leave. Yeah. They safely boarded the ship and set sailed. Many mourned for their pops but were glad for what Straw Hat did to Akainu. Luffy next to Ace looked at him and he looked back. Smiling, they shake hands. Luffy had done it. He had gotten out of there and freed Ace. Although he also frowned a bit when he looked back. He wished he could have the Ossen with them. At this, Ace also looked back with him, followed by Mako, then Izo, then Jozu, then followed by all of them. Luffy waved, smiling sadly. Farewell, Ossen. Whitebeard looked at the ships retreating and saw the faces of his son disappear off into the distance. He smiled softly and waved back farewell to them when he saw how Luffy waved at him, which was followed by his sons who were crying. He looked at Akainu, who was kneeling in pain, and could hear him saying, "Why the dick," in a high-pitched voice before fainting, which he laughed at. Now then to deal with the Marines and his traitorous son who arrived on the ship. When the sight of Marineford vanished, they stopped waving and went to check on the others and tend to the wounded. Luffy, remembering what Ace had said, turned to Ace. Any Ace? What is it, Lou? A nickname he had given Luffy during when they were children. About what you said back then. What does fuck mean? Ace went pale. Chapter 4. Upon leaving Marineford, they reach an island where the Marines wouldn't find them while their allies split up to divert their attention or to escape from the Marines. Right now the island they were at also were broadcasting the events at Marineford, and upon seeing it, they immediately scowled. While they were getting away, it seemed the traitorous, backstabbing bastard son had arrived. Marshal D. Teach, or more known as Blackbeard, has came to finish off Whitebeard. Before their father had succumbed to his wounds, with his remaining strength, shouted his final words. His last middle finger and fuck you to the Marines and governments. One Piece is real. Upon their father uttering his final words, all smiled softly but had tears in their eyes. That was something their old man would do. After that, Teach had covered Whitebeard up and did something. They didn't what he while in there. But he was using Oyage's devil fruit somehow. They were initially shocked but quickly were infuriated and furious that the bastard son had stolen his devil fruit somehow. He was challenging the Marines to fight, but before he could, a ship arrived with a certain red hair. Yonko. Shanks. Luffy shouted upon seeing him. You know him? Jinbe asked, raising an eyebrow at him along with everyone else except for Ace, who was told about him and even met him. Yeah. He came to my island when I was 6 and when some bandits were badmouthing him and trashing the place, the bandits kidnapped me and I beat them up. Luffy said cheerfully while the Whitebeard pirates had deadpanned look. They should be surprised at the fact a child beat up a group of bandits, but after seeing what he did in Marineford, they just couldn't. The red-haired Yonko had came to end the war and he would handle the burial of Whitebeard. The Whitebeard pirates were grateful for that, and also challenging Blackbeard and the Marines to a fight if they wanted one. They backed off with Blackbeard retreating and Sengo announcing, "The war has ended." After that announcement, they went to get barrels of alcohol and a bottle for juice for Luffy and proceeded to pour them into mugs. Marco got everyone a mug of beer while Luffy a mug of juice and raised his own mug while everyone followed. To Pops, to Oyage, to Whitebeard, to Ossen, were the many things they said with some tears in their eye. They cheered at the fact that even though their father was dead, they had gotten Ace out alive. After celebrating, mourning and drinking, they had taken a rest at Toto Land, Whole Cake Island, Throne Room. When Edward said his final words, Big Mom smirked that the Marines and government were going to have a headache. Not only did Roger state that he left one piece for the taking, the Yonko, Whitebeard, second closest to Pirate King, now announced the confirmation that One Piece was real. What a fucking legend. Although she was pissed at Blackbeard for killing him, it should have been her or Kaido to finish him off. When she ever crosses paths with that backstabbing bastard, she will slaughter him with the biggest smile on her face. When Blackbeard had somehow stolen Edward's devil fruit, she and her children were shocked at the fact that he didn't die, although Big Mom was frowning more rather than being shocked. Something was wrong with him, but she didn't know what. Before she did slaughter him if he ever dared to set foot here, she was gonna use her devil fruit on him. Something felt off from his soul. After that, Shanks had came and ended the war, and thus came the conclusion, with the broadcast ending after a few seconds of silence when Sengo announced the end. Tamago, gather every information you can find about my son and what he has done, along with his crewmates. Also, bring the intel to me around dinner. Of course, Mama. Tamago left to search for information through several contacts and information brokers. My children, you are dismissed. Look forward to dinner where Tamago would inform us about your little brother. Yes, Mama. Her children left while discussing things amongst each other, mostly the fact their brother had been found, the older ones looking cheerful and happy over the fact they had found him. Big Mom leaned back in her chair while still staring at the screen, but with a visible smile on her face. Her son was alive and had grown strong. Thank God. You were fine. Luffy. Wait for me. Mama will get you back where you belong. At Marineford, after the war. After Sengo announced the end, morale was pretty low. They had failed to execute Fire Fist Ace. And now him and his brother were loose out in the seas. He took a sit on a piece of rubble. Marineford had been completely destroyed. Straw Hat Sengo clenched his fist thinking about him. How did we not notice his strength? For him to beat 3 admirals, freeing several prisoners, and lastly the worst, he had free fire. Fist Ace, how did a brat like that slipped under their radar? How did we miss the fact that he could use haki? The more Sengo thought, the more fury he felt for himself. Luffy was able to defeat the warlord Crocodile. He was able to get Devil Child Nico Robin out of Eni's lobby, and defeated a Cypher Paul agent. They should have dealt with him sooner or looked further into him before. I'm gonna retire and leave it to Aokiji. He seems to be a good fit for the role. Sengo was going to Kong for the resignation tomorrow. Right now he wants to lay on a bed and sleep after the entire ordeal, but before he could get up and do just that, Fleet Admiral Sengo, Commodore Brand-New, was calling out for him. Here you are. We've had word from Impel Down. Is Magellan all right? Sengo asked with his eyes closed, preparing for the worst. He got beaten badly and is barely alive. He's been treated intensively by the medical team. Brand-New said. He's a dutiful man, he's blaming himself. Which Sengo agreed. Magellan has taken great pride in Impel Down being the most secured prison. They said that if he could move now, he'd kill himself. Don't let him do such a stupid thing. Sengo, eyes opened, said to Brand New. Why yes, sir. Sengo now asked the bigger question. They wouldn't just give word of the wardens. Status only. Something must have happened down there. What has been going on at the prison? Allow me to give you the condition as it stands. The situation on level 6 is especially bad. It's literally a tragedy. This had Sengo sweating. Level 6 held the worst prisoners. A tragedy. Brand New proceeded to tell Sengo what Blackbeard had done, which had caused him to pale considerably. He freed selected members from the worst criminals in the world. This was bad, really bad. Yes, but only 4 prisoners were taken. San Juan Wolf, Evelo Pizarro, Vasco Shot, Katarina, Devon. But there are obviously more prisoners missing from level 6. Which means Sengo was now having a massive migraine at this. There are more escapees from level 6. Aren't they? If even one of them from level 6 sneaks in a country somewhere, the entire population would be in grave danger. Sengo had to send Marines to put them back. He had to validate the numbers of who's not in there, get their names, and put a most wanted list out. Now, Brand New at this acted strangely. Sengo looked worried. What's wrong? Well, I'm under orders from the world government to keep this matter a secret. Sengo, eyes widened at this. More blunders will harm the government's reputation. Sengo clenched his face and was pissed at this. Damn them. Sengo took a deep breath at this but was gritting his teeth. How could they let this go? Many people would be in danger for this. But later he relaxed. At least he was resigning and didn't had to deal with this mess. He was free. But before that, he also had to decide the new bounties on Firefist Aces and Straw Hat Luffy. After some time to compose himself and thinking thoroughly about this, he told the Commodore. Brand New. Why yes, sir. Firefist Ace and Straw Hat Luffy, their bounty. What about them? For Firefist Ace escaping execution, being Roger's son, and going toe-to-toe with Aokiji, make his bounty 850 million berry. Yes. And for Straw Hat Luffy, for breaking in and out of Impel Down, releasing several dangerous criminals, most notably Buggy, former warlords Crocodile and Jinbe, the Knight of the Sea, Emporio Ivankov, fighting, overwhelming, and defeating 3 admirals, and castrating Admiral Sakazuki, and being the main reason why Ace has escaped, and being the son of Dragon, make his bounty. The next day, with Whitebeard pirates and Luffy. When they were all sleeping, they were woken up by Marco. Everyone get up now. His brothers and Luffy woke up, some grumbling or some wanting to sleep more but drag themselves towards Marco and gathered. They saw Marco scowling with a newspaper. Izo grumbled, clearly wanting to sleep more. What is it? Marco started to look at the newspaper and read out loud. Firefist Ace execution failure. Emperor of the Sea Whitebeard dead. Blackbeard on the rise. At this they scowled or frowned at the reminder of their pop's death and how Teach had stolen his fruit. Also I got a call from red-haired Shanks. He gave us coordinates on where Oyage's grave is. Marco said with a solemn look. At this they also have a solemn look. They prepared for this, even though they didn't want this day to come. It was gonna happen anyway, be it death in Marineford or death by old age. Let's go properly pay him our respect as his sons. Far away in the second half of the Grand Line, they have arrived and made their way on top of a hill. Their allies were there and they joined up. With them, they made a path for Marco, Ace and Luffy to walk towards Shanks, who were facing them down with a sad smile. They arrived with Marco, Luffy and Ace greeting Shanks, Luffy being not as energetic as this was. A serious moment, they faced forward and looked at his grave. Edward Newgate below his gravestones is decorated with different flowers placed by his several sons, and on top blue flowers with his weapon, Murakumojiri, stabbed on top of his gravestone with his flag hanging by the hilt, and below it is his coat tied to it with a flower wreath. Around it, red hair. Marco said before turning towards Shanks. I've no words to express my gratitude. Thanks for doing this for the Oyage. Ace said, bowing towards Shanks. Shanks responded with a soft smile. Stop talking nonsense. I always respected Whitebeard, even though he was my enemy. Even Sengo respected him. Shanks turned to Luffy, smiling. Also nice to meet you again, Luffy. Ace. The Whitebeard pirates who separated from the main group perk up at this. Straw Hat Luffy knew Shanks. They have heard about Ace's encounter with Shanks but weren't informed of the fact Straw Hat also knew the man. Luffy and Ace smiled back, yeah. And also Shanks gave a thumbs up and patting Luffy's shoulder while also grinning this time. Towards him. Good job on castrating Akainu. At this the serious tension was broken with faces of confusion and shock while those who witnessed it were snickering or giggling at that. What do you mean? A pirate asked in confusion. Shanks looked at all of them this time with a newspaper in hand while smirking and read out loud. The headline. Admiral Sakazuki castrated by Straw Hat Luffy. The admiral in question had been mocking Whitebeard, calling him a loser and a coward directly to Ace. At that they scowled and were gritting their teeth for what that bastard say. When it seemed like Fire Fist Ace was about to attack the admiral, his brother had stepped in, also enraged by what he said about Whitebeard. At this the Whitebeard pirates had soft look while looking at Straw Hat Luffy. He had instantly went in front of Akainu and wound up his fist and delivered a devastating punch towards said admiral's nether regions. Now at this they winced at first before they softly giggled and snorted at this. Whitey nodded while smiling in approval of Ace's little brother. Medics reported that the hit was so strong, Admiral Akainu was effectively castrated for life. Both his testicles are broken beyond repair and in fact, they were completely non-existent at this point. And that's how it ends, Shanks said smiling. He was proud of what Luffy did. Upon hearing this, the Whitebeard pirates praised for what Luffy did to Akainu. They were grateful. Luffy, I also can't express my gratitude towards you for doing that, Marco said smiling. That's my little brother. Ace said with pride in his voice with a big grin. All right. We should go now, Shanks smiled when he looked at Luffy and patted his hat. You have grown stronger. We will meet each other again one day. Yeah, and when I get there I will give your hat back. I will become king of the pirates. Luffy responded. At this Shanks laughed and walked off, while the others around him were stunned. Ace's brother was ballsy as hell. Marco turned towards his brothers and his sister, Whitey, with a frown on his face at first. Let's mourn for our Oyaji. At this they respected Whitebeard in several ways, praying, putting flowers on his grave, crying for their loss. After everyone mourned, most of them left. The only ones staying were the division commanders, Jinbe and Luffy, until a pirate came running. Marco, big news. Everyone turned towards the pirate who said that who was holding bounty posters. What is it? Marco asked, and he was handed the bounties and smiled, turned towards Ace who was sitting with Luffy eating their 10th plate of food when he saw Ace's. Ace, what is it? Your bounty increased. At this it had everyone's attention. Ace and Luffy stopped eating. How much is it now? 850 million berry. At this they cheered and raised their drinks for Ace, who beamed at that. Sugoi. Ace. Luffy was amazed at his big brother's bounty. Ace took the bounty off Marco's hands to look at in astonishment, but he immediately scowled upon seeing his bounty. What's wrong? Vista asked with a raised eyebrow, noticing how he seemed agitated. My name. Ace screeched, bursting in flames which shocked them. What about it? Luffy asked, surprised by his sudden outburst. Ace just shoved the bounty in front of Luffy's face and read his name out loud. Goldie Ace. Luffy read out loud, which caused him and along with the commanders to immediately understand his anger now. They felt sympathy for him. He had really hated his old man. It was the reason he stuck with port gas instead. Marco deciding to change topic as an attempt to quell his anger, which seemed to work. Announcing his little brother's bounty. Anyways, Luffy, your new bounty is. Marco looked at his bounty and was stunned by the increase. Something that Haruto noticed. What's wrong, Marco? Straw Hat Luffy. At this Luffy perked up and looked at Marco in curiosity. My bounty increased too. Marco just nodded and was trying to get the words out. Yeah, it's 1 billion berry. At Toto Land, Whole Cake Island, dining room of the castle. All the children were gathered and took their respective seats. They were served copious amounts of foods and beverage. They did take after their mother's appetite after all, while their mother was waiting for Tamago to come back. His here, Katakuri said, looking into the future. At this the Charlottes looked at the door and Tamago had opened and appeared before them. Tamago was nervous and tense when all 85 Charlotte children, including Big Mom, were staring at him. Ah, Tamago. So what have you found about my missing son? Big Mom asked while sipping a cup of tea to help calm her nerves. I have contacted our usual informants and told them about the situation of Luffy, and have some interesting information, to say the least. Tamago said, sweating slightly when Big Mom put her cup down and started staring at him along with her children. "So, what have you found?" Big Mom asked, hardening her stare a bit at the part where he said, "Interesting. It seems he was raised in East Blue on an island called Fusha. We were told about his childhood experience by a woman who owns a bar." Tamago was now sweating less and frowning a bit. He had heard about what Garp did to his own son. It was not pretty. Childhood experience. Daifuki raised an eyebrow at that while Tamago slowly nodded. The way he phrased it doesn't sound good. "We weren't given much, and it was the tip of the iceberg of what he had been through." Tamago said, no longer sweating but was looking more angered. He was a child. A child didn't deserve to go through that. So far of what we could gather, Garp had trained Luffy by throwing him valleys, leaving him alone in dangerous forests, tied to balloons over dangerous heights, and fell and broke several bones. The Charlottes were, upon hearing this, were horrified, but that feeling was replaced with anger and fury for what Garp had done. "What?" Amande said coldly with reptilian eyes. "Tamago, who was the bar owner?" Smoothie asked with a poker face, but if you saw her eye it held anger. "A woman who went by Makino. She was the one who would patch Luffy up when he was trained by Garp. She had only witnessed some of what Luffy had been through." "How old was Luffy when he was trained?" asked Perospero with a hardened look while clutching his candy cane tightly. "He was there along with Compote to raise the children and made sure to give them a good childhood. When their mama was different back then, he would always be there for his younger siblings, so when Luffy had slipped out of their grasp, he was worried about him. And it seemed his worries came true. According to the bar owner, she first witnessed Luffy's training when he was 3 years old. *slam***. Brulee had slammed the table in anger and looked at Tamago with a murderous look, although she spoke softly with restrained anger. "He was 3 years old." Brulee said slowly, as if she was making sure she heard things wrong. "Sadly she didn't." Tamago nodded at this. "Yes, but this was only by an eyewitness. We don't actually know the confirmed age." Big Mom was very murderous right now, clinging onto her chair very hard and letting a slip of her Conqueror's haki out, causing the guards to get knocked out before she composed herself. "If Garp comes on our island, I'm sure you all would want to have a nice long chat with him, right?" their mother said with venom in her voice towards her children. The siblings nodded and had a dark look in their eyes. "Yes, Mama. I'm sure we would like to talk it out with him." Big Mom with a deep breath looked at Tamago. "Continue." "Yes. After a certain day after training, he had went to the bar where he had came into contact with the Yonko red-haired Shanks." The siblings' eyes widened at this. "Shanks? What was he doing at East Blue of all places?" Smoothie asked in shock and curiosity. For someone like him to be in the Eastern Seas, what was so important that had him sail there? "We haven't found out why, but it seems during his stay on that island, Luffy and Redhair are on good terms." Tamago, the specific information I asked for. "What's his devil fruit?" Big Mom asked. "Which head?" Her children look at her for a second before looking at Tamago. Yeah, they were also wondering. "That. His devil fruit is the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It's a paramecia-type fruit that makes the person who eats it into a rubber person." "Are you serious?" Cracker asked, staring wide-eyed at this. It sounded kind of useless. But so what he did in Marineford, that was it? He did all that with that kind of devil fruit? Tamago nodded towards Cracker. "Yes. He is immune to blunt attacks unless infused with haki. And normal bullets and cannonballs quite literally bounce off him. Not only that, but due to him being rubber, he is most likely immune to lightning." The Charlottes and even Big Mom were shocked at this. "That devil fruit sounds weak as hell, but that sounds useful as hell." Effiler said. She was surprised by how useful that fruit was. "The way he uses it and also his gear 4, he seems very creative," Smoothie said while her siblings nodded in agreement. Their brother had used the fruit in such a way that no one else would think of. He was able to beat 3 admirals with a technique he came up with that combined both his armament and devil fruit in a way that made it look like he was a mythical Zoan. It was pretty genius. Tamago continued onwards when they were now looking at him in anticipation. During his time in East Blue, he has defeated several big-name pirates, the biggest being the Fishman Arlong. Of course he did. He's my son with Charlotte blood running in his veins. Not to mention that bastard too, Big Mom stated with pride. Tamago continued when they were just silently staring at him. He had sailed with his crew to Logtown where Tamago now gulped in worry of Big Mom's anger and fury when she hears His next words. Where what? Big Mom asked, raising an eyebrow at him. Where Buggy and Iron Mace Alvida caught Straw Hat off guard and were gonna execute him in the same place as Rogers Tamago quickly set out. Huh. All of them said with looks of fear, anger, fury. A look that promised pain. Tamago quickly said his next words before they asked questions about it. But before he was executed, the platform Luffy was on was struck by lightning. Now they quickly shifted from anger quickly to huge concern. Not only was he gonna be executed, but he was struck by lightning. Calm down. Tamago stated he was immune to lightning, so he should have been fine. Perospero said, arms crossed, and glared at Tamago. Right. Tamago nodded rapidly yes. He had stood up from the rubble after the scaffolding collapse and he said, I am alive. That's nice. At this the Charlottes were relieved. Seriously, this was just the stat. What the hell kind of things had he been through? They were starting to feel a bit of sympathy for his crew that were with him. They must have a lot of heart attacks from their brother seemingly being a trouble magnet. Tamago continued on to explain his journey from Paradise, where he fought the King Wapple of Drum Kingdom, and how he had previously retreated when there was an attack. The Charlottes scowled at that. He sounded like a coward, and went to Arabasta, where he met Fire Fist Ace, his sworn brother, and he later went to Mock Town and beat up another big-named pirate going by Bellamy, and later on he went to Water 7, where he gone to Ennie's lobby. He was at Ennie's lobby. Galette widened her eyes at this along with some of her other siblings, while the others kept a poker face or narrowed their eyes at that. Yes. It seemed that CP9 agent had kidnapped one of his crewmates, and him with his crew stormed the place to rescue her. Luffy also defeated the agent Rob Lucci. The more they hear about his adventures and his accomplishments, the more amazed and impressed they were. Later on he was in Thriller Bark. You don't need to explain that one. Lola had informed us of the events that took place. Big Mom told Tamago, the siblings who weren't there when Lola called, looking at their mother, wondering what has happened. For those of you who don't know, Luffy defeated Gecko Moria and had also gained a new crew member there, a skeleton musician going by the name Brook. The siblings who didn't know were surprised by that. Their brother defeated a warlord. Later on he would go to Sabaody where Compot picked up a cup of tea and began drinking. He punched a celestial dragon and immediately spat it out after that. Her siblings also spitting or choking whatever they were eating or drinking, while the ones who weren't were gaping at that, a celestial dragon. They deserve it, Amande nodding in approval when she heard that. Her siblings also agree. The celestial dragons were shit. His got guts, Snack nodded while smirking at that. An admiral had been called on the Straw Hats. But not only that, Luffy was accompanied by two other pirates who were supernovas like him. The Charlottes perked up at the mention of the supernovas. They were essentially super rookies who surpassed or had a bounty of around 100 million berry. They were considered the worst generation and standing on top and being the most dangerous. One was Luffy, her son. She was proud of his son becoming a terror in the making. Luffy with the pirate Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law confronted the Marines themselves, decimating the Marines before heading off separately. Then Luffy and his crew disappeared before being confronted by a pacifista developed by the Marines, and later being confronted by the warlord Kumar, where he used his devil fruit and sent them away to unknown locations. At this the Charlottes were worried about their brother's well-being. They didn't know if he was close with them or not, but if he was, that must have hurt to be separated from his Nakama. After that it seemed he was informed of the execution, as he later broke in and out of Impel Down with prisoners, which later would be what you have seen on the broadcast. He must have been searching for Ace in that prison, but by the time he got there he was already on a ship sailing for Marineford. Katakuri theorized. He also respected and was impressed by his determination to save his brother. To go to that kind of lengths for him, they must have been close. Which brings us to now. One of them asked. His bounty updated with him in the news. Tamago pulled out a newspaper seemingly from nowhere and started reading. Admiral Sakazuki castrated by Straw Hat Luffy. The admiral in question had been mocking Whitebeard, calling him a loser and a coward directly to Ace. The Charlottes frowned or were gritting their teeth. They did not like what he tried to pull when looking at the viewing. When it seemed like Fire Fist Ace was about to attack the admiral, his brother had stepped in, also enraged by what he said about Whitebeard. In such a short time meeting with Whitebeard, Luffy must have respected him to the point where he stepped in because of how disrespectful he was. Dior commented. He had instantly went in front of a kainu and wound up his fist and delivered a devastating punch towards said admiral's nether regions. The males wince remembering the blow, while the woman of the family smiled and smirked. Medics reported that the hit was so strong, Admiral Akainu was effectively castrated for life. Both his testicles are broken beyond repair and in fact, they were completely non-existent at this point. Rip that Admiral's future children, Cracker said, which had his siblings snorting and snickering in amusement. So his bounty? Smoothie asked Tamago. His bounty? Tamago hadn't looked at the poster yet, but when he did he was frozen in place. What is it? Amande asked, raising an eyebrow at Tamago. How high was it now? Is almost as high as katakuri's. At this they choked or did a spit take and whipped at Tamago in stunned silence with wide eyes, even Katakuri going wide-eyed at that. Big Mom was as surprised as them. Almost. Nutmeg said. As high. Akameg said. As. Olmeg said. Katakuri. Harameg said. Nii-sama's Fuyumeg said. Bounty, they all said together. Their little brother may have surpassed Smoothie and is on par with Katakuri in terms of bounty. Yes, his new bounty being exactly 1 billion berry. Our baby brother seems to be quite the powerhouse. Perospero exclaimed, proud his little brother had a bounty on par with Katakuri, with Compote nodding alongside him with joy in her face. In fact, it seemed like the Charlottes were celebrating or cheering at that. They had a brother who was also worth 1 billion berry besides their big brother Katakuri. The 4 sweet commanders Katakuri, Smoothie, Cracker, and Snack were getting excited. They had a little brother who could be like them. A sweet commander who would probably be on par with either one of them. Once they got him back, they wanted to spar with him. Mama, my missing son is so strong. Big Mom was proud of her son's accomplishment, learning that his bounty is almost as high as her second eldest son made her beam with pride. She had a son who was pretty much the 5th sweet commander at this point. She needed to get him back with her family to bond with after years of being separated. And then she frowned. She also needed to know what Garp did to her son. It was only based off someone who only saw some of his training, not all out it, but in the meantime, they needed him to be back in their arms. Then, moving on to his crew. Tamago, that would be enough. I think my children and I would look to hear him talk about it. Himself here with us, yes. The Charlottes turned towards their mother with a feeling of hope. Do you mean? Brulee had hopeful looks in her eyes which went watery. Big Mom nodded and smiled softly at her children. She stood up and made an announcement that they have waited to hear for a long time. Some even had tears in their eyes as they have waited for this day to come for their mother to finally announced it. It's time for our missing son to return home. They celebrated and cheered at that. Tamago, put pressure on our usual contacts on the whereabouts of Luffy. Yes, Mama. Somewhere on a ship. A man was staring at the sea. He was smiling until 2 child silhouettes appeared and called out to him. Sabo, the one with the straw hat said. Sabo, the one with the pipe said. Chapter 5. Sabo-kun. He had snapped out of it and the silhouettes faded away. There you are. Is something wrong? He looked down and responded to the woman who called for him. No, I was just looking out at the sea. That's so. She now faced towards where they were sailing, their main base of operations. We're back in Baltigo for the first time in a month. I hope everyone's doing fine. They had been on a mission that took quite a while and haven't really heard much from them, keeping radio silent. Yeah, we had our hands busy from all those missions. Let's make a report to Dragon-san first. At Baltigo, the Revolutionary Army's general headquarters. As Sabo opened the door with Koala behind her, it was kind of chaotic. His comrades have been running towards the situation room in a hurry. Something must have happened while they were away. 2 revolutionaries spotted them and stopped. Oh, Chief of Staff. You came at the right time. Come to the situation room. The paramount war between the Navy and the Whitebeard pirates has ended. They were a bit surprised at this, but they followed them into the room. Upon entering, many of their comrades were gathered around with their boss, the leader of the revolutionaries, Dragon. A man came in with a bunch of newspaper in hand and placed them all on the table where they could read about it, the people around him picking up and reading the news headlines and were stunned. Whitebeard died. So, one of the 4 emperors of the sea has been taken down. The Navy received heavy casualties for this, but it's to be expected. They were asking for it when they announced his execution. What about Ivan Sama? Is she alright? It doesn't state anywhere that she died or anything. The only one who died was Whitebeard, who had stayed to protect. Sabo and Koala, not interested in the news, proceeded to the hallway, wanting to take a well-deserved break after the whole ordeal. They would just read the newspaper later. His sons and allies from dying especially. Sabo was about to reach for the door until he heard something from his fellow revolutionary, the would-be person to be executed. Fire Fist Ace. Sabo stopped and raised his head at that name. Why does it sound? But more importantly, Dragon-san, look. Is it true? Is Straw Hat Luffy your son? He took down 3 admirals and castrated 1. Yes, he is. Dragon smirked, seeing one of the headlines where his son beaten 3 admirals and castrated Admiral Sakazuki. He was proud of what his son had done. Sabo turned back. Those name, Luffy, Ace. He walked towards the table and grabbed a newspaper to read it for himself. Upon seeing it, he widened his eyes. He started sweating a bit. This guy. He looked at the headline. Fire Fist Ace lives. Sabo had started to hurt a bit, then he saw something in his mind. I'm gonna become a pirate. I will defeat others and become infamous. It'll be the only proof of my life. The newspaper had small wet spots. He was sweating more. Remember, AC. It doesn't matter if all the people around the world reject me or despise me. I'll become a great pirate and show them what I can do. ***. He was breathing deeply. He was starting to remember a bit more. Ace. Luff. Sabo-kun. Are you alright? Koala had noticed how Sabo seemed to be breathing deeply. You're acting strange. There were more wet spots on the newspaper now. And they weren't from sweat. They were from tears. Sabo started crying a bit. Ace, Luffy. I can't believe Ace was Gold Roger's son. He was the biggest threat to the Navy. They wanted to get rid of him at all cost. But ultimately, failed. A memory started appearing. Did you guys know? They say Akainu was trying to get under Ace's skin. But Luffy had stepped in and punched him in the balls. He was crying and breathing deeply more. Ace. Luffy. He remembered. That day. We can become brothers if we exchange a cup of this sake. Brothers? Really? When we become pirates, we might not be on the same ship, but our brotherhood will always be with us. Wherever you are, whatever you do, we will always be bonded together. They took a cup each and smiled. So from now on, we will be brothers. Yeah. He started crying more, taking his hands off the table. ***. Just to slam the table harder. Are you alright, Sabo? It was getting harder for him to stand, breathing harder and more tears coming out of his eyes. It all started coming back. This is ramen. It looks good. Well, try it. I need more. 3 more bowls of ramen. The ramen noodles tasted great. I told you so. Who, me? I'm Sabo. I heard that you're an old hag who's like a man among men. I'm a woman, can't you tell? Dayton. When I become a pirate, I'm gonna get the best cook in the world. I'm gonna become a pirate first, so good luck with that. Not Faye. I'm gonna become a pirate before either of you. Ho, you guys still on about that? Garp. I heard Ace was mischievous. But you seem like a good boy. No, I'm not. Makino. He couldn't take it anymore. Sabo-kun. Sabo. Chief. Now I know. The one who survived wasn't some random pirate. The one got him out wasn't some random pirate. Memories kept playing throughout his head. He wasn't just some threat in the pirate era that needed to be eliminated. Ace. Luffy. They are my brothers. And I did nothing to help. I'm not gonna run from anybody. I'm not gonna lose to anyone. Ace turned back and looked sheepish while rubbing the back of his head. Well, maybe except you, Luffy. You really are strong as hell. He had blacked out from the sudden rush of memories and was starting to wake up. He saw a revolutionary with Koala and the one who trained him since he was a child, Hack. Upon seeing him open his eyes, they went from concern and worry to relief. The chief woke up. Really? That's great. He seemed to be in the medical room of the headquarters. He rose up and saw Koala slowly start to cry when they faced each other. He was surprised at that. I thought you were gonna die. Sabo-kun. You had quite the high fever, Sabo. Hack said. Koala leaped onto Sabo's lap and hitting her fist. Unto him, she was really worried. You've been sleeping for a day straight. And I have been worrying. Sabo rubbed his head in guilt. Yeah, sorry, it's just that. I got my memories back. Asterisk sniff asterisk what? You got your memory back. Sabo turned back facing forward. Yeah, I remember everything now, including who I am and why. I left home to sail out to sea. I see Koala now smiled even though there's still a bit of tears left in her eye. That's good. But then it hit her. Wait. Are you gonna quit the Revolutionary Army? Then. Hack also realized this. He got his memories back and remembers his identity. He may want to go back to how he was. Sabo closed his eyes in deep thought before opening them and responding, no, I'm not. Koala smiled at that. Her partner wasn't leaving. Is Dragon-san still here? Yeah, he is. I need to talk to him. Dragon's main office. Yo, Dragon, it's me, Sabo. Can I come in? Go ahead. Sabo entered Dragon's office and took a seat in front of him. Are you okay, Sabo? I heard that you were awake after sleeping for 2 days. What happened? Dragon-san. I remember Dragon at this raised his eyes at that, and leaned forward at Sabo. So, what will you do now? I will stay, but I need to visit 2 people. Someone. Is it from your recovered memories? Sabo nodded at Dragon. Yeah. We became brothers after exchanging a cup of sake. Ace and Luffy are my brothers. Dragon widened his eyes at this but recomposed himself. Brothers. I see. You would like to reunite with them, yes? Sabo nodded at that. Yeah. They should be around this island. One of our man who was also an ally of Whitebeard's was there. You can see if any one of them are still on that island. Sabo bowed at Dragon. Thank you. No problem. Go reunite with your brothers, yeah? Yes, but before he could leave though also Sabo. What's wrong? Sabo asked. Take care of my son and tell him I said hello for me, would you? Dragon smiled softly at Sabo, who returned it with his own. Yeah. After Sabo left, Dragon frowned a bit. He couldn't forget about them, Luffy's other side of the family. He always kept wondering if he made the right choice or not. Flashback 17 years ago, Luffy's birth. Dragon was outside the castle of his ex-wife Big Mom. After he got her pregnant, she divorced and kicked him out. Damn old man. I always thought you were screwing with me on how babies were born. She told me to go with her assistant and do something in a tube and she would be pregnant. It wasn't called sex. It was insemination. That's how babies are actually born. Well, I think anyway. He shrugged off before focusing on my objective. Dragon muttered to himself, I have to get Luffy away from here. Big Mom would raise him to be used as another tool like the rest of her children. When he got divorced, he had stick around and sneaked around the castle and noticed how strict her children were. Linlin had sometimes even insult her own flesh and blood, who would look saddened or gonna cry at any moment, and if they did their mother would tell them to shut up or go away. She always seems obsessed about unifying different races. It was probably the reason why she had so many children of different races. She had several husbands that were like him. Even though they were her children, it seemed like she saw them as hers to control and demand, as if they were puppets or soldiers to her. He didn't want Luffy to suffer such a fate. So on the day of his birth, he would come in by the window to the nursery, grab the child and get the heck out of Dodge before they could notice him. He was standing directly underneath the window of the nursery, with observation haki. He had noticed 2 souls up there, both seemingly very young, as if they had been born. Must be Ewan. Big Mom had gave birth to Ewan and told Dragon that she had been already pregnant by the time Dragon also got her pregnant. Something about having vitro-fertilizing, where they would inject sperm inside her uterine cavity to fertilize an egg or something. How did that old man mess up explaining human reproduction that badly? He put his hood up to hide his face and climbed up to the window and saw Luffy in his crib, entering the room, picking up and cradling him, and he smiled when he saw his face. He sure is adorable. And that's when he saw him open his eyes and started to panic a bit. He tried to give his kindest smile at him when the newborn looked at him scared. He cried when he saw his smile. Shit. He immediately said reassuring things and sang him a nursery rhyme which seemed to calm him down. He let out a breath of relief. Thank fucking God. Hopefully that didn't. Asterisk creak asterisk. Brulee had entered the room staring at Dragon in shock. Alert anyone? Well shit. Dash. Dragon quickly went up to Brulee and knocked her out by a chop to her neck when she started screaming. He had to go now. Who knows who might have heard her scream. He went up to the window, and just as he was about to leave he heard gasp behind him. There, standing in front of the door, were all the Charlotte siblings staring at him in shock and were frozen in place. What surprised him though was Big Mom standing behind all her children. She looked stunned, frozen and afraid. Was she worried about their child? Dragon was confused. He saw how she would look at you and muttering how he was gonna be a wonderful tool or things like that. She seemed uncaring, so far to look fearful. No, can't be. She's just afraid of losing another tool. And when thunder struck, he disappeared. Flashback end. I wonder, was she actually concerned about Luffy? Was she afraid of the loss of her newborn when she didn't seem to care about her other children's well-being? Did I make the right choice that night? Was some of the things Dragon muttered? Only time will time. At the place where Whitebeard was buried. After a while, Boa Hancock's ship arrived with Rayleigh on board on the island, the Whitebeard. Commanders were wondering what Roger's first mate wanted. Yo, Rayleigh. Luffy smiled when he noticed who it was. Nice to see you again, Luffy. Rayleigh smiled back, waving at him. Luffy-kun, you know that man? Marco asked in surprise. Yeah, we met in Sabayati in a bar. He helped with coating my ship. So, what are you doing here? Rayleigh. Rayleigh turned serious. Do you know where your crewmates are? Luffy also turned serious. No, are they alive? Rayleigh nodded at that. Yeah, Kumar sent all of you to different locations so that you could escape. Right now they are in the right places to train. Luffy tilted his head at that. Train. Kumar was helping us. Yeah, as your strength stands you could probably take on anything the new world sends at you. But how about your crew? Your crew was defeated with ease against Kumar, right? Luffy frowned at that. He had a point about his crew, but he also needed to train. The only reason he couldn't react in time was being caught off guard, and he was the first person to go by Kumar. Even though he was pretty strong, he needed to train his observation haki. He started thinking. He only unlocked haki due to his insane Jiji's training, but even then it took years for him to fully master both armament and conquerors. His observation haki was pretty weak, and for his crew to gather strength and maybe even haki, so for the length of the training, he decided, Rayleigh, do you mind training me on observation haki? It's not exactly my strongest. Luffy rubbed his head sheepishly while Rayleigh agreed. So for your crew, they are in the best place for training, right? Rayleigh nodded at this. 2 years. We will meet up again in 2 years. Ace was surprised at this. 2 years. You sure, Lu? Luffy turned to Ace for this. Yeah, 2 years. After that we will meet up at the Sabayati to set sail. Luffy looked at Rayleigh. Where will I train? Amazon Lily. All right. Luffy turned towards Ace and his ship brothers. Goodbye everyone. May we meet in the new world 2 years or so. CYA later. Ace's brother Marco waved off Luffy with a lazy smile. Stay safe, Luffy. Ace told Luffy, who pulled him into a hug. Yeah. Luffy-kun, do you mind if I accompany you? Jinbe asked Luffy. Luffy looked towards Rayleigh, who shrugged and looked back at Jinbe, nodded at him. Sure. On board the ship, Rayleigh looked at Luffy. So what will you do? How will get the message across to them? Luffy-kun. Luffy smiled softly. I will go once more to Marineford. As they set sail to Amazon Lily first to plan it all out, they went into action at Marineford headquarters. The place had been wrecked heavily from Whitebeard but was under repairs. Several photographers had come to take pictures and write articles about it. Whitebeard's last words have inspired pirates from all around the world and are causing trouble. The Marines aren't able to catch a break, navigating from sea to sea in order to suppress each uprising or any potential sparks to ignite more behavior. A Marine ship was sailing towards the docks, a photographer have noticed. Oh, would you look at that? Here's a squad coming back from a mission. But the ship didn't enter the bay, which the Marines have noticed. What's that ship doing? It didn't enter the bay. What's it doing? The two photographers also noticed they are acting strange. Asterisk bang asterisk. One of the cannons fired. Everyone had heard it and was scared of it, but nothing happened. Firing blanks. What the hell's going on? A high-ranking Marine had approached to see what's going on. Has that ship attempted to contact with us? He asked a Marine who was on site. No. A Marine had grabbed binoculars and was shocked when he saw who was on board. This is impossible. Why did he? What is it? It's Mugiwara Luffy. What did you say? And indeed, he was standing there on the bow with his arms crossed. He hijacked a warship. Why now of all times? The high-rank Marine ordered, send that warship to the bottom of the sea. Asterisk boom asterisk. Gyojin Jujutsu Kairyu Aponzioi. A huge wall of water rise up and blocked the cannonballs. The Marines were shocked. Beneath the waters Jinbe had came up and they noticed this is that. The Sea Knight, Jinbe. There's another man. And there was a person sitting on the barrel with a handful of bullet pellets. They fired again, but he threw the bullets and exploded the cannonballs before they could reach the boat. A marine had noticed his face and was shocked. No way, is that the living legend, former first mate of the Roger pirates, the Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh. The marines and civilians alike were stunned and shocked. What the hell are those three doing here? The marines noticed something. They aren't approaching. They are circling around the entire island. It's like a funeral at sea. After circling around, they entered the bay. A funeral? Did they found out our forces aren't here right now? You miserable pirates. Launch a concentrated attack from all directions. Asterisk bang asterisk. All fortress cannons aimed and fired at the ship. They had hit and sunk the boat. There was nothing but smoke and pile of woods drifting in the sea. They were silent until an arm stretched out and out came Rayleigh, Jinbe and Luffy, who landed inside Marine Ford. Now go wild. Right. Luffy ran forward while the Marines were ordered to catch him, but Jinbe and Rayleigh had blocked them off. I will take you on. I think you will also have to entertain me as well. Gomu Gomu Eno. Luffy extended his leg and swept the Marines off his path. Whip, asterisk. He was looking around the place searching for something. Reporters noticed and followed him. Where is he gonna do? He's heading west. So he's not planning to destroy HQ. He kept running and knocking Marines out of the way until he approached a bell. The ox bell. What is he going to do with the ox bell? He jumped forward towards the bell, grabbing the giant rope attached to the bottom of the bell. He ringed the bell. As he was ringing the bell, the people around the island had heard it and was stunned and frozen in place. After ringing 16 times, he turned, jumped down and walked off slowly. The reporters, stunned at first, immediately trailed behind him taking pictures of him. Marines tried to stop him. But they couldn't. They just couldn't swing or attack him. They were afraid. He approached a hole in the ground and took out a bunch of flowers and dropped it to the hole. He bowed his head, taking of his hat and putting on his hat. This was his silent prayer, his show of respect to those who lost their lives. Photographers noticed him posing and moved to a better position for a photo. This will make a great shot. And that's what they did, taking several photos of Luffy. This was his plan to send a message to his crew. Written on his right upper arm was the new date. 3D crossed out with 2Y uncrossed. After a giant fish appeared out of the ocean, he smiled. That was his cue to leave, leaping and running towards Jinbe and Rayleigh. After catching up to them, they leap off and escaped from Marine Ford. A reporter pretty much summed up the whole event. This is big news. As newspaper were printing and were spreading out, a certain fleet admiral was talking about his resignation. The newspaper have slowly been spreading throughout the world. It had reached Arabasta, Crocodile and several infamous pirates, including the Supernovas, Dayton, and everyone who knows him. Meanwhile, on the Grand Line, Luffy was on Boa Hancock's ship, was heading for Amazon Lily to train. Sorry about this, you guys, for the long trip. I forced you to make this long journey. It's fine, we're used to long expeditions. What are you doing over there? We are keeping watch over you to make sure you're all right. It's an order from Heberheim-sama. Heberheim-sama got too excited earlier, so she collapsed. Right now Luffy was lying on bed while the Kuja females were pulling on his skin in astonishment of how he could stretch. So we are keeping close watch over you. Luffy stared far away while staring up. I wonder if they'll get the message. As long as they read the article, they should understand it. The key is that it is something you normally don't do. Rayleigh and Jinbe were also getting their skin pulled. Jinbe got irritated. Hey, will you stop that? There was one man who seemed rather dense. Well, I'm sure he will figure it out. Somehow. It should be understood by all of them. That's what I believe. Where the Straw Hats currently are. So that's it? Luffy, I got your message. I understand. Really? That's it. Chopper. I see. So that's how it is. Got it, Luffy. Robin. So that's what you meant, Luffy. Sanji. Roger that. I got it. Luffy. Usopp. I understand. Shishi decided that all on his own without taking our feelings into account. Nami. I see. Frankie. Oh, is that so? I understand, Luffy-san. Brook. The ruins of the Shikarao Kingdom. Hey, get up. How long are you gonna stay asleep? How many times do you have to get beaten up before you're satisfied? Try to think about me too. Forced to treat your wound over and over. Right now Poona is scolding Zoro for fighting with Mihawk again. Nobody asked you to do that. Poire gasped at that. Oh, really? And here I brought you another newspaper from the news coup. 2. Zoro perked up and was interested, and there's an update regarding your captain in it, too. And now she had his attention. What was that? He winced from standing up so suddenly he was bruised and wounded from fighting Mihawk. What did you say? He demanded. Poire panicked a bit. Calm down. I said calm down. After he did, she held it in front of him so he could read. Hey, have you read it yet? My hands are getting tired. Wait just a little longer. There must be something here. Luffy wouldn't do something like this. The fact that Rayleigh was with him means that it was his idea. I'm sure there's something here. Zoro knows his captain well. He was the first mate after all. When Mihawk told him how Luffy had freed Ace, he felt relief but then shame and guilt. He wasn't there for the captain, but not only that, he was weak. They all were weak, they knew it. When Luffy tried protecting them from the pacifista, when he took down the 3 admirals and freed Ace, they needed to get stronger so he wouldn't need to protect them. Whatever, just hurry up. Poire shouted at him. Reading the newspaper, it shown how he was showing respect for the dead. This was something he never saw him do. It was out of the ordinary. There must have been meaning. Focusing on the picture of Luffy, he noticed the message and knew what he had to do. Later. I beg you. Zoro had approached Mihawk, laid his 3 swords and bowed deeply towards him. Mihawk kept a poker face while Poire was gaping at him. Please, train me in the ways of the sword. Mihawk's eyes narrowed. I've misjudged you. Roronoa, you ask your sworn enemy to teach you? You should be ashamed. Get out of my sight. I have no business with such a worthless man. It seems I overestimated you. Mihawk started to pour wine. What are you doing? You are only embarrassing yourself. Zoro gritted his teeth in frustration. I want to become stronger. You failed to defeat the baboons and couldn't go out of sea. Then you crawled back here. I have nothing to teach one such as you. Zoro started to bleed. I did defeat the baboons. This caused Mihawk to widen his eyes before composing himself and looking at Zoro, he beat them. Now I just need to take your head. But I'm not so stupid to think I can beat you right now. Mihawk raised his eyes at him and questioned him. I don't understand. If you still see me as an enemy, why do you bow before me and ask to train you? For what purpose? Zoro raised his head and looked at Mihawk in his eyes with conviction. So that I can surpass you. Mihawk relaxed and laughed. So you want me to train a swordsman who wants to take my own head? He asked, amused. What a strange man. Honestly, it's ridiculous. And you're still disgracing yourself. It would seem that I have found a man truly filled with ambition. He commanded Poire. Oi, ghost girl. Tend to his wounds. Poire looked at him irritated. Hey, don't tell me what to do. The training will begin after your wounds have been treated. Zoro lit up at this while Poire reluctantly bring him to his room while grumbling. What an awkward man. When someone like him disregards his pride, it must be for another the sake of another. In Zoro's room where he's currently staying, Poire opened the newspaper 3D with an X over it and 2Y. You're right. It's tattooed on Straw Hat's right arm. Zoro held up a piece of paper and explained, we made a promise to meet up in a certain place in 3 days. And look at how it turns out. Poire thought, so 3D means 3 days. But it's crossed out and the 2Y means 2 years. 2 years. We won't meet in 3 days. We will meet each other again in 2 years. Everything else he did was a distraction to hide the real message from everyone else. This message was meant for us. It's the decision that Luffy made. There's no point in rushing. Luffy could take on the new world, but us? We won't stand a chance there. Zoro narrowed his eyes as he continues on. We'll stop here and increase our strength. And then we'll set sail once more. Chapter 6. At the place where Whitebeard was buried. When Luffy left, the Whitebeard pirates were gonna stay a little longer before setting off too, right? Now Ace was lying on the grass hill with a newspaper in hand while his hat was laying right next to him. Any Sabo. Would you look at that? Our little brother is stronger than us as always. He even beat 3 admirals and castrated that bastard who disrespected Oyaji. Picking up his hat and standing up, he muttered to himself, watch over him, will you, Sabo? Marco. There's a random person at Oyaji's grave. Ace tensed and was surprised. Who the hell was here? Did he come to pay respects? He ran towards his father's grave and saw a figure. He was wearing a cloak that covered everything. He turned around, noticing his presence, his cloak also obscuring his face. Marco and the others had came towards him and were behind him, They were also tense and wary of the unknown man. Who are you? What business do you have on this island? Ace asks, glaring at the figure with his guard up. He took off his cloak and looked at Ace with a soft smile. It's me, Ace. Ace was surprised when he saw his face. No, it can't be. He died. We shared a bottle of sake and we three became brothers. Ace surprised but shook his head. It can't be. He now was narrowing his eyes at him. How do you know that? Of course I would know. I'm your brother after all. Ace had hope in his eyes. Was it him? Sabo. Yo, Ace. It was. With that, Ace ran towards Sabo, who opened his arms expecting a hug. It's been a long time has asterisk bonk asterisk. But got punched in the face instead. His ship brothers went from stunned at the fact that Ace had another brother besides Luffy, to dumbstruck when he punched him. Ace grabbed his collar and shook him furiously. Long time no see MYASS. Where the hell have YA been these past years? Sabo started looking sheepish. Sorry. When that celestial dragon shot me I had amnesia. Ace stopped shaking him. Amnesia. Ace tilted his head in confusion at that while Sabo nodded. Yeah, amnesia. Sabo, noticing his confusion, put it in more simpler terms. I lost all my memories until I heard about the war. Ace let go of Sabo. Oh, but still. Could you have remembered me earlier? Luffy cried. Because of you, because we. Ace started crying a bit, which startled the Whitebeards. They never seen him cry. Where? Thought you died. Sabo pulled him into a hug. Yeah, sorry. I'm back. They stayed like that for a few moments before Marco interrupted them. As much as heartwarming as this is, what the hell is going on? Who are you? They both let go of each other and Sabo turned and gave a two-finger salute. I'm Sabo, the staff chief of the Revolutionary. Nice to meet you. Oh, that's nice, Ace told Sabo, said as if this was common sense. Staff chief of Revolutionary. Sabo explained to the Whitebeard pirates of his past, how he got shot by a celestial dragon and saved by dragon and got amnesia, how he joined the Revolutionary, how he regained the memories. That must have been rough, Marco said to Sabo, with his brothers also feeling sympathetic for Sabo, who was presumed dead for so long. He only regained his memories because someone mentioned Ace. If he hadn't, he probably would have known later and they wouldn't have Ace reunited with Sabo. Like this cause, they would have sailed off by then. Sabo nodded towards Marco. Yeah, it was. Sabo turned to Ace with a look of guilt. Sorry, Ace, I wasn't there to save you with Luffy. Ace just chopped his head. Idiot. How could you do anything if you had no memories of us? And, besides, at least you're alive. Sabo smiled at that. Yeah. He then remembered and asked, any Ace, where's Luffy? He went with Rayleigh. Kumar had separated him from his crew. When he freed me, he decided that he would reunite with his crew in 2 years. 2 years? Yeah, so they could prepare themselves and train for the new world. Luffy could take it on, but his crew can't. That's so. So do you know where he is? Amazon Lily. Sabo smiled at this. Do you know where the place is? Nope. Sabo blinked. You don't? Nope. Sabo now just deadpanned. Here. Fuck. But I got Rayleigh's contact so we could contact him from the Den Mushi where the island is, Ace said. Just as Luffy, Jinbe and Rayleigh were about to leave, Rayleigh gave him his contact in order to call him if he wanted to talk to Luffy to know how he was doing. Sabo let out a big sigh of relief at this. He didn't have to reunite with him after 2 years. That would have been real awkward. Thank fuck. At Toto Land, Big Mom's office. Right now Big Mom was in her throne room going through paperwork. Being the queen and ruling over several islands was rough. Fortunately, due to her wanting to change for the better, she had also started to collect the souls of only citizens who have committed a crime. She still had taken large amount of souls via foolish marines, pirates, criminals who dared and tried to attack her land, sending her children to deal with and bring back any survivors to drain them off their souls and sometimes going out herself. She had also sent her forces to claim Fishman Island. Since Whitebeard's death, this was the perfect opportunity to strike. She may have seen him as a drinking buddy, but she wasn't that close to him, and besides, she's a pirate. And speak of the devil as Tamago appeared before her, hopefully for what she wanted. Tamago, I swear to God, if it's something not related to Luffy or Fishman Island. Big Mom trailed off while looking at him that dared it to be not urgent or important. Paperwork was stressful as hell, especially with how many islands she had conquered and had to deal with. Tamago gulped before speaking up. Straw Hat Luffy has been sighted in Marineford. Big Mom raised her eyebrow at that. Why did he go to Marine Ford? Tamago, where did you heard about this? It's in today's newspaper on the front page. Tamago said as he showed her the newspaper in front of her. She took it and squinted her eyes and saw the picture of her son who seems to be showing respect. Tamago, gather all my children around the meeting room. Big Mom ordered. Yes, Mama. At Toto Land, meeting room. Big Mom sat and waited for her children to come, and away they all came, Prim strolling Praline in a giant bowl on a trolley, and settled down. She immediately cut to the chase. We have found a lead on Luffy. Tamago present the information. The Charlottes now shifted their interest towards said man. Yes. In the newspaper today, Straw Hat Luffy has appeared in Marine Ford. He had appeared before them with the Sea Knight, Jinbe, and along with the first mate of Roger, Dark King, Silvers. Rayleigh. Why was Roger's first mate with Luffy? Smoothie asked in widening her eyes at the mention of his name before narrowing. Why was someone like him with his baby brother? It isn't stated anywhere for his reasonings. But when Luffy was there, he had rang the ox bell and proceeded to throw a banquet of flowers and showed his respect, which is the picture you see now. As Tamago said this, an image of Luffy projected onto the screen. He was standing with his eyes close, holding his hat to the chest. The siblings looked at it for a couple of seconds until Pudding looked closely at the image with all three of her eyes. There was something on his arm. 3D2Y, she muttered. Flamp, who was sitting next to her, heard what she said and questioned. You found something in the image. Now all of her siblings were looking at her, and she closed her third eye at that. She turned and nodded at Flamp. Yeah. She looked at all of her siblings before pointing at Luffy's right arm. His right arm has 3D2Y tattooed on it. At this they followed where she was pointing and noticed it also. 3D is crossed out, but 2Y isn't. Amande muttered while rubbing her chin deep in thought along with her siblings. Tamago, are there any other leads? Big Mom asked him. They had been thinking and rubbing their heads for a while but couldn't come to a conclusion. When they get him back, they will get him to explain. Yes, our spy who was amongst the Whitebeards at his funeral had taken a submarine and observed Luffy when he later boarded the warlord Boa Hancock's ship. Boa Hancock, when one the male siblings asked with a hint of jealousy. Actually, most of the males were jealous of hearing how it seemed their brother was acquainted with such a beauty. Tamago nodded at that. Smoothie crossed her legs and came with the most reasonable conclusion possible, so he should be on Amazon Lily, the country of woman, lucky. Brownie muttered with jealousy, his brother's also thinking the same thing as him. It will take a while for us to reach there, even so there's no guarantee. Cracker trailed off. But it's our only lead. Big Mom finished her son's sentence for him. But even so, we can't let this opportunity slip by. Big Mom looked at her children, thinking about who would be best before she landed her eyes on three of her oldest children, Katakuri, Amande, and Brulee. You will be tasked with bringing back Luffy. Said individuals responded and smiled at this. Yes, Mama. Good. All of you are dismissed. Wait for them to report if they find your brother. Yes, Mama. At Amazon Lily. Jinbe halfway through the journey had business to attend to, so with a hug and a farewell he left. After docking, they took a stroll deep into the forest with Boa Hancock showing concern for her love interest, which Rayleigh waved off, saying he would be fine. Right now Rayleigh was walking with Luffy, going deeper in the forest. While walking, Rayleigh asked Luffy, Luffy-kun, why is it that your observation is weak but your armament in Conquerors isn't? Luffy just shrugged at this. I didn't learn much about it except Shanks told me you could detect attacks with it, and also I didn't know how to train it. That's so. After stopping after a couple minutes of walking, Rayleigh demonstrated what observation haki is. When a giant red elephant came and swung at him, but he dodged it. After that he blindfolded Luffy and took a couple of swings at him, before his den mushi started to ring. Who is this? Yo, it's me, Ace. Rayleigh and Luffy peeked at this. Ace. Why are you calling? Luffy is alright and is training right now, if you're wondering. Rayleigh questioned him. He did say to call him if he wanted to know about Luffy's well-being. No, it's nothing like that. Actually, there's a very important person that wants to meet him in person. Rayleigh raised an eyebrow at that. How is that so? You don't know where Amazon Lily is, don't you? He noticed how the mushi looked sheepish. Yee. After Rayleigh told him where Amazon Lily is at, Luffy training was paused so he could meet this important person, which Luffy was wondering who it was. After waiting on the shore, they saw a ship coming with Ace waving at them, and behind him was a figure wearing a cloak. After landing, Ace greeted Luffy and asked him how he was doing, before remembering why he came here. Oh yeah, Luffy. What? The person behind him. You should know him. At this, Luffy looked behind Ace and saw the figure approaching this. At this, Ace moved aside. Smiling, Luffy tilted his hat at the person. I know you? Who are you? The figure took off his cloth and raised his head, smiling. It's me, Luffy. At this, Luffy was confused. What do you mean it's me? Can't you recognize your own brother? Luffy tilted his head at this. Brother. Listen, the only who can call me brother is, he pointed at Ace, and the guy who died much earlier. Sabo took off his hat so he could get a better look. D died. Luffy's eyes started to become watery. He let out a few tears before his eyes popped out and was gaping. It couldn't be, he looked like. He gasped Sabo. He moved backwards and hit a tree and slumped down before getting back up, looking at him. Angrily, I don't believe you. At this, Sabo closed one eye and smiled wider. We stole a bottle of sake from Dayton and made a toast. Luffy was stunned. It had to be him. Who else besides Sabo and Ace would know? Looking at Ace for confirmation, he nodded while smiling. He looked back at Sabo. He stretched his arms and clung to him like a koala and cried. He was alive. He was alive. What the? Where have you been all this time? Ace and I thought you were dead. I'm sorry, Luffy. I had amnesia. After crying for a bit and also bringing Ace to hug him also, he tilted his head at Sabo. What's amnesia? Can I eat it? At this, Sabo snort. Same old Luffy. Rayleigh coughed to get their attention. So who are you? Sabo looked at Rayleigh and smiled. I'm Sabo, Chief of Staff of the Revolutionaries. And also, Ace and Luffy's brother. Luffy tilted his head at that Chief of Staff. It means he's really strong like me, Ace replied. Oh okay. Rayleigh widened his eyes. Really? He looked at Ace and Luffy, who nodded. Why didn't you tell me? It's a long story, Ace said. Rayleigh responded, I have the time to listen, and so Ace started to explain to Rayleigh about what happened. Rayleigh learned about who Sabo is and what had happened to him. He gave a sad smile. Towards Sabo, that must have been horrible. Sabo nodded, frowning. Yeah, I won't let it happen again. Sabo looked at Luffy sheepishly with guilt clear on his face. Also, sorry I wasn't there to help. Luffy just blinked and beamed at him. It's okay. Ace is alive. And besides, you are here with us, too. Sabo smiled at Luffy for that. He was quick to forgive, and he was right. All three of them are alive. What are you going to do now? Luffy asked him. Apparently Sabo works for his father, who told Sabo to say hi for him, which Luffy responded by saying say hi to Dad for me back to Sabo, which he nodded at. I'm going to stay in the Revolutionary to rebel against the government, Sabo said. With that said, all brothers gave one final group hug and waved farewell. Ace sailed off with Sabo so he could get back to his boat to sail back to his base while he was going to sail with his ship brothers into the new world. Sabo, when he goes back to base, was going to continue things as per normal and fight against the government. He did leave feeling the guilt wash away as both of his brothers forgive him. Although Luffy was quick to forgive people easily as long as he could see a shred of good in them. Meanwhile, Luffy will train with Rayleigh, mainly focusing on his weak point, which is observation. Haki. He needed to be able to detect and predict attacks so someone like Kumar wouldn't blindside him again. After going back to the forest, he put Luffy on blindfolds and made him fight a huge blue gorilla and the elephant that attack him. Twin jet pistols. Leaping down, he took off his blindfold and smiled. All right. Turning to Rayleigh, he asked, so, how was that, Rayleigh? Don't get ahead of yourselves. You only just completed the first step. He picked up a club and slumped it on his shoulder. Next, I'll be your opponent. Asterisk whack asterisk. Ouch. After that, he was relentlessly hit in the head at day, while meeting up with the animals and somehow communicating with them to also hit him with his blindfolds on to train even further. Slowly he was improving. After a few days, Rayleigh was walking around Luffy with a blindfold on and several bumps on his head form, hitting him with a haki-coated club. When Rayleigh took a couple of swings, he was bailed to dodge. Are you able to sense things? I don't quite get it. You've dodged a consecutive 20 attacks now. You are learning fast, but still got a while to go. Luffy. Rayleigh was surprised by the speed of how fast his learning. Asterisk snap asterisk. Asterisk whack asterisk. Rayleigh had took a snap on the twig, which got him distracted and a hit to the head. You got distracted by the noise. Damn it. Luffy was pretty infuriated, but he understood it wasn't going to be easy with how weak his observation was right now. I guess it'll still be a while until you can dodge 100 times. Asterisk growl asterisk. Rayleigh just laughed at Luffy's hunger. You better hurry up or you'll die of hunger. He motivated. Luffy. Luffy was drooling at the reminder of food. Don't remind me of food. Alright, let's continue, yeah. Yeah. Luffy trained by dodging hits from Rayleigh at day while dodging animals who also helped him. Trained by night, he slowly was getting better at dodging his hits. Until one day, a ship that looked like cake came sailing towards them. 3 people were talking. Amongst themselves. You think our little brother is on this island? Only one way to find out. Wait for us, Luffy. Meanwhile with Rayleigh, with his observation haki he frowned at who he detected. Looks like we got company. What do the Big Mom pirates want? Luffy took of his blindfold off his and looked at Rayleigh. What's wrong? Rayleigh turned to Luffy with a serious look. Be on guard. Big Mom's children are coming. Luffy turned serious and tense. Enemies. Rayleigh nodded. When we sailed with Roger, we're snuck into Big Mom's island and took a rubbing of her poneglyph. She did not like our captain at all. Rayleigh started walking out of the forest along with Luffy. He told him to hide behind a bush or a tree while he dealt with them. Standing on shore, arms crossed, glaring at the ship approaching. He prepared. What do they want? When they dropped anchor, the 3 people came forward and walked up to Rayleigh. Rayleigh was on guard and wary. What do the Big Mom pirates want here? The man with the scarf came forward. Relax. We aren't here to harm you. We are here to find Straw Hat Luffy. It's a personal matter. Rayleigh wasn't really convinced by what this man was saying. Who are you anyway? I'm Katakuri. These 2 are my sisters, Brulee and Amande. What personal matter do you have with Luffy-kun? Relax. When we mean personal, we mean family-related matter. At that Rayleigh raised an eyebrow, but before he could say anything Luffy had popped out of the bush, tilting his head at them. Family. Who are you guys? Rayleigh mentally facepalmed. Luffy can be kind of a fool. Sometimes. When they saw Luffy, they widened their eyes before giving a soft, gentle look at him. Finally. They found him. Brulee, not able to stand still, charged towards Luffy. Rayleigh mentally cursed, shit. But before he could do anything, he was stunned, thinking she would attack him. She hugged him and cried. Thank God, you're okay. She cried while hugging him. Katakuri and Amande walked forward. Behind Brulee, Amande had tears in her eyes, patting Brulee's shoulder to comfort her while getting a good look at him and smiling warmly, while Katakuri also did the same to her other shoulder and ruffled his hair, his eyes a bit watery, his expression hard to read properly with his scarf blocking his mouth. Luffy, confused, pushed them away while raising his arms up. Who are you guys? Brulee answered him, smiling warmly while wiping the tears away. You probably don't remember us. You were just a newborn baby at that time. Luffy tilted his head. You know me. Of course we do, after all. We are your older siblings. Luffy was gaping at these 3 tall people who proclaimed that they were his older siblings. Oh, older siblings. No way. I only shared a cup of sake with Sabo and Ace. Katakuri stepped forward and explained slowly, we are your blood-related siblings, from your mother's side. Luffy tilted his head at this. Mother? I have a mom. They winced at this. He haven't been told about who she was. Amande nodded. Yeah, which makes us your older siblings. Luffy just nodded and beamed at that. He had other siblings besides Ace and Sabo. Okay, while the 3 sweat dropped, he sure is quick to accept. Rayleigh, who had been watching from the sidelines, was stunned and shocked from the revelation. Big Mom is Luffy's mother. Brulee nodded towards Rayleigh. Yeah, when he was born he was stolen from us by Dragon. Sate while scowling. Rayleigh widened his eyes a bit at that. He doesn't know what Dragon was like in person. He had heard rumors of him from several people on what Dragon was like. It didn't make sense for him to steal Luffy if the rumors about him were true. Maybe something had happened that caused him to kidnap Luffy. Rayleigh questioned them. Are you sure? Katakuri had stepped forward. Yeah, we were there when it happened. Before we could do anything he had disappeared when lightning struck, he said, grimacing. It was his worst failure. Luffy tilted his head at them. I was stolen by Dad. Amande nodded before explaining further. When you were born, Dragon had snuck into the nursery and stole you from your crib. Brulee flinched at that. She had been there when it happened after all. Luffy was scratching his head at this. He sounds like a bad guy, but he saved Sabo from that mean celestial dragon he was contemplating. He stole him from his other side of his family, which would make him bad, but he also saved his Sabo knee, which made him good. Katakuri narrowed his eyes at that. He didn't know he had another step-brother Sabo. Luffy nodded at him beaming, yeah. Sabo. We shared a cup of sake and Ace and Sabo became my big brothers. Luffy's smile dimmed a bit. We thought he died when he was shot by a celestial dragon years ago. But turns out he's alive. So what do you plan to do? Rayleigh stepped forward and asked them. We plan to bring him back to Toto Land to reunite him with our family, Brulee replied. Luffy on the other hand shook his head. I can't. I have to train my haki. Katakuri raised his eyebrow at that haki. He looked at Rayleigh for a response. I was training Luffy-kun here to improve his observation haki. It's his biggest disadvantage, right? Now Rayleigh told Katakuri, who nodded in understanding at this. Brulee, deep in thought, came up with an idea. How about this? All of them were listening to her. My devil fruit ability, the Mira no Mi. It can turn a mirror into a doorway of sorts. We can leave a mirror here and I can bring him back here for training. How's that? Rayleigh nodded at the idea. That could work. At the rate he's learning, he could probably finish in no time. After that, you can bond with him with your family. The Charlottes lit up at Rayleigh. Acceptance of the idea. You have my gratitude for taking care of our brother. Katakuri said. Rayleigh just laughed and waved it off, although he had to ask. How is Big Mom nowadays? Rayleigh asked. Katakuri had answered him with a soft look. She's getting better. At this Rayleigh smiled. Is that so? Rayleigh looked at Luffy, who looked like he wasn't paying attention at all. What do you think? Luffy. Luffy snapped out of it and nodded. Yeah. Sure. While the Charlotte's sweat dropped. Did he even pay attention at Brulee my suggestion? Katakuri gestured for Luffy to come. Well, let's go back to Toto Land to meet with the rest of the family. They have really wanted to see you. Luffy nodded. After waving Rayleigh farewell, Luffy with his newfound older siblings sailed off to Toto Land. In the meantime, Luffy got a good look at them and gasped when he noticed their distinct features. Hey, your neck. Luffy pointed at Amande, who along with her siblings recoiled and flinched. They were expecting him to insult or make a bad comment of it. It's so cool. I want a tall neck like that. Where did you get it? Luffy said with stars in his eyes. They were stunned with Amande going wide-eyed and a shiny glint in her eyes. People outside of the family and Mama's island always saw her as a freak, a monster. But their baby brother, who was raised elsewhere, didn't. Her brother liked her neck. Amande, composing herself from her shock, smiled lightly and pat his head. Thank you. I was born with it. So cool. Amande smiled wider at how her little brother was so amazed by her neck. Luffy, after staring a couple of minutes in amazement, smiled and stretched his neck. The siblings were surprised at first before remembering. Right, devil fruit allows him to stretch. There. Now we look alike. Luffy beamed at Amande and hugged her. She softly giggled and warmly smiled at this and patted his head, which surprised Katakuri and Brulee. She always kept a cold look on her face ever since she turned into a teenager. Katakuri stepped forward and asked him, so, aren't you a bit suspicious of us? Luffy just shook his head and smiled at him. No, you guys seem like good guys. Katakuri asked another question. Don't we look different to you? As if we aren't your siblings by how different we look. Katakuri pointedly looked at Brulee and Amande with their obvious different looks. Luffy tilted his head at this. So, Ace Knee and Sabo Knee have different parents, but we still are siblings. So what if you look different? You guys are siblings, be it by blood, drinking sake, together or by choice. At this, Katakuri was surprised. Someone who didn't bet an eye that they weren't siblings. That was a nice change, not only that he sounded surprisingly wise. Brulee stared softly at their little brother. I think our siblings and Mama would get along nicely. With you. At this, Luffy stared at Brulee, surprised. A branch. Katakuri huffed while Amande snorted in amusement, while Brulee twitched at that. My name is Brulee, not Branch. Luffy just laughed at that before he got a good look at her face, especially her scar. Any Branch. It's Brulee. Where did you get that scar? It looks cool. I got a scar too, see. Luffy pointed towards the one under his eye while beaming at her, although she frowned. The siblings were silenced while Brulee put her hand on that scar, reminiscing a bit, while Katakuri had a grim look of the reminder why she had it. Luffy frowned when it seemed like a bad topic. Brulee took a deep breath. When I was a child, Broy and I wandered around an island. When we went into an alleyway, a couple of older boys were there. Turns out Katakuri attacked when they made fun of his scar. They kept badmouthing him, so I stood up to them and they attack us cause they couldn't hurt him, so they went after the weaker ones. I was able to push Broy out of the way though. Katakuri had a look of guilt at this while Amande put her hand on Brulee's shoulder. For support. Luffy frowned at that. That's stupid. I hate cowards like that who do that. The older siblings nodded at this. Most people target the weaker and younger ones cause they can't beat or reach the older and strongest ones, Amande said, remembering how Marines went after her younger sister Poire. Luffy remembered how Blue Jam had found him and his brothers when Ace was different. They tried tying him up with rope, but that didn't work. When Blue Jam's group came, he had thrown Ace and Sabo away and let himself be captured and tortured. He may have been stronger, but he couldn't react fast enough when they hit him. Katakuri grimaced and clenched his fist, seeing what his next words are before they came out. Just like when Blue Jam had that guy beat me with knives on his gloves because he couldn't get to Ace knee and Sabo knee. Luffy nodded in understanding. After a few seconds of silence and realization of what he had said, Brulee went pale while Amande kept a flat look but clutched tightly on her sword. Their brother's childhood wasn't looking so good, with his training and now the fact that he was apparently tortured. What has he been through? Brulee looked at his scar and touched it softly. Is this how you got the scar? Brulee asked gently. Nope, they didn't give me a scar. I did this one myself. At this Brulee widened her eyes, while the other raised an eyebrow at that. Why? You what? Brulee raising her voice in surprise while Luffy explained. I wanted to prove I was tough enough to become a pirate, so I stabbed myself. At this they were either pinching their noses or face-palming at that, although Katakuri was surprised seeing what he said next. But yours is cooler. I got this scar because I did it. You got it because you stood up to someone who was mean to your brother. You were brave and strong. Luffy beamed at Brulee, who was surprised before having tears in her eyes. Whenever Mama had given birth to a child, when they look at her they would cry. Most of her siblings when they were children flinch when they saw her, until they got used to her because of her witch-like appearance, and with the scar it added to the scariness. When Luffy was born he didn't do that. He laughed and smiled at her. The scar had been a grim reminder of that day, but when her little brother had put it like that, yeah. She got this scar because she stood up to them, older people who could beat her. She stood up to them that day. She had been brave. This scar never truly was a reminder of her pain. It had been a reminder that she stood up tall and strong up against people who made fun of his brother. Yeah, you're right. I was pretty brave back then. Brulee smiled at Luffy at this while crying softly in joy. Amande and Katakuri were stunned before they started smiling, even though one of them was covering it up. It seemed their sister had weights on her shoulder removed. Luffy noticed how she was crying and decided to hug her. His older brothers Ace and Sabo would always hug him when he cries, and in turn he would hug them back when they feel sad or depressed because they felt like they shouldn't have been born or they were a mistake. When he gathered his crew, he had hugged Chopper when he felt like a monster that everyone hated. He had hugged Robin when they got her back from Eni's lobby and told her he was glad that she was born. She had cried but was smiling and hugging him at that. They weren't mistakes. He was happy Ace and Sabo were born. He was happy his crew was born. Be it Marines, pirates, or strangers. He was happy everyone was born. You need a hug. Sabo-ni and Ace-ni would always hug me when I cry. Which Brulee gratefully returned, hugging him tightly while sobbing quietly into his shoulder. He noticed how Amande and Katakuri looked like they wanted to comfort her also. He stretched his arms and pulled them into a group hug. They were surprised at first, but they started hugging both Brulee and Luffy. They shot a grateful glance at Luffy for helping their sister and being able to comfort her in this emotional moment. Such a warm, accepting embrace. How nice, the three older siblings thought when being hugged by Luffy. It felt nice being hugged by him. After a while they pulled out of the hug with happy expressions on their face while Brulee was clinging onto Luffy from behind while beaming at him, which he returned when he looked up to face her. It felt like Sabo and Ace holding onto him. Luffy looked forward and tilted his head at Katakuri. When are we going to get there? Katakuri responded, it will take a while. In the meantime, he took out a snail phone from his jacket. Why not we contact the rest of our family at Totoland? Big Mom right now was in the throne room tapping her feet. In front of her is Katakuri's den. Mushy. She's been waiting for the good news in a while. She wasn't alone. Some of her children had come by and hang around while looking at the den. Mushy also. She waited and waited and waited until it started to ring. Everyone in the room had tensed and lit up at this. Did they found him? Big Mom ordered her children to get the others. Once everyone was there she picked it up and all of them were even More tense, some seemed to pray or were hoping for the good news. Big Mom with one big breath asked him the question everyone wanted to know. Did you find him? The snail phones mimicked what his facial expression was like. It changed suddenly to a curious and childlike expression. Who is this? Is this my mom? My name is Monkey D. Luffy. I am going to become the king of the pirates. Katakuri, Amande, and Brulee facepalmed at that, even though she was his mother. He still said that to a Yonko of all people. At this they had mixed reactions at first. Some were stunned, some snorted, some had dropped their jaws, while Big Mom, hearing his voice on the snail, shed tears and smiled warmly. After 19 years, they are getting him back. After being shocked, they started celebrating. Finally, they are getting him back. Finally they are going to see him again. Finally, they were all going to be together. Luffy on the other end of the snail was confused at the sounds of what seems to be crying and cheering. Oi, what's going on over there? Big Mom just stood down again and smiled warmly. Don't worry about it. Katakuri, how close are you now? Oh, okay. Luffy said while Katakuri said halfway there. Also, Luffy won't be here most of the time in the first few weeks or months. Big Mom along with her children were confused as to why. Big Mom asking the question on everyone's mind, why not? We had came across Rayleigh who was training Luffy. Now at this they were surprised. Big Mom eyes narrowed at that. For Rayleigh to take interest in her son, he must have seen something in him besides his strength. Rayleigh. Why? Smoothie asked. She was stunned at the fact that her little brother was training with Roger's first mate. Luffy was training with him to improve his observation haki. Brulee made a proposal to put a mirror there so she and Luffy could travel through the mirror world to bring him back to Amazon Lily to train with him. Big Mom decided to ask about it later when they got back. Is that so? Alright, make sure to inform me when you're about an hour away from here, alright? Big Mom asked of her son. Yes, Mama. And after that, he hung up. After that, Big Mom smiled warmly at her children as she stood up and announced something. 3 words. These words are something they wanted to hear. It's been a long time coming. His coming back. Chapter 8. After that she had dismissed her children and stayed while looking at the snail phone before going back to her regular business, which was just paperwork. She had also gotten word from her forces in Fishman Island. Jim, the former warlord, had proposed a meeting to talk things out, which she accepted. Now all that's left was Katakuri's return with Luffy. Everything was falling into place. She was drinking tea and waiting for the snail phone ringed. When it did, she picked it up. Katakuri had called saying they were waiting an hour away. She started moving towards the harbor. When she was in the corridor, her children who were there looked curious on where she was going. Mema, where are you going? Mayukuru, her long-armed daughter, asked with Marble beside her. Also wondering. Big Mom looked at her children smiling. Katakuri called. They are 1 hour away from here at this. Her children were surprised before scrambling to gather the rest of their siblings. At that, Big Mom turned back and started walking to the harbor to greet them. When she went outside and started walking through the streets, her citizens were surprised at her presence. Some shot her sad, sympathetic looks. Rumors of her missing child had circulated around Toto land. After her child's disappearance, she had stopped being tyrannical towards her people, although anyone who dared insult her or her children were met with their souls completely drained by an angered mother. After walking towards the harbor, she just stood waiting, looking onwards to the horizon while the people around her were wondering why the Yonko was standing there, seemingly waiting for someone. After a few seconds, they were met with a surprise. Her children had also slowly started to came. Not only that, it seemed all her children were there except for Katakuri, Amande, and Brulee. Oven sat on a box with Daifuki by his side, standing arms crossed, waiting for their brother. Katakuri and Luffy. Mondi was standing there with Hachi and Effiler, who was tapping her feet, waiting until Amande and their brother Luffy came into view. Prim and Praline were hanging in the sea. Opera was looking into the ocean with binoculars. Anana was being cuddled by Poire. While she held her stitched-up teddy bear, she learned to stitch up her teddy bear, which she took great interest in rather than stabbing it violently when Brulee offered to teach her to stitch so she could stab it again. Mondior had a snail in hand waiting for a signal of a ship approach from the territorial sea slugs. Many of them were making idle chat, wondering what their little or older brother was like. He had potential to be the 5th sweet commander after Snack, and a bounty as high as Katakuri's to boot, and had the strength to show it after beating 3 admirals. Not only that, he was pretty bold and had guts. He proclaimed to Mama that he was going to take after Roger and be the next king of the pirates. He was going to be an interesting one. After a while, Mondior got a report from the snail Mondior-sama. We have got a signal of an approaching ship. At this the siblings knew who it was. Don't worry. It's one of ours. Mondior said. Roger. They are coming, Fa. Opera announced, lowering his binoculars. Perospero motioned for him to lend it to him, which he did, and he looked into the sea with it. That was definitely one of their ships. They are gonna arrive soon, Peroin Tilda, he said in delight at the sight of his siblings coming into view. He noticed something coming flying into view, which he squinted his eyes at. His siblings noticed this. Cracker tilted his head towards his older brother, curious in what he saw. What's wrong, Peroni-san? Perospero didn't respond. He just seemed focused on whatever he saw. Perospero now saw who was coming flying at them. Luffy, he said out loud before realizing he was flying right at them. Perospero now was sweating before he shouted incoming. But before they could react, bang, something had crashed into their right side into a building. The citizens stepped back but didn't leave while the Charlotte were on guard. At this they tensed and unsheathed their weapons at whatever crashed into the wall, until, man, that was a pretty hard crash. A voice came from the impact. At that they lowered their weapons. That voice. A figure came out of the rubble and debris coming out from he had crashed. Wearing short, blue trousers with cuffs, sandals, and a sleeveless red vest, he had shaggy black hair. At that they sheathed their weapons back and relaxed, knowing who it was. It was him. Luffy just blinked up with curious and innocent eyes and tilted his head at them. Who are you? Guys. Are you guys my siblings? Katakuri had told Luffy that the rest of the family may be waiting at the harbor. He didn't heard her mother say anything about gathering them there. Big Mom had started walking forward slowly while her children made way, stopping when she was standing in front of him, both looking at each other, although Big Mom's face was shadowed. After a few seconds of silence, she started shaking her shoulders. Sniff. She was holding back tears. He was there, right in front of him. After all these years, he was here, in front of her. Luffy tilted her head at her in deep thought. He looked behind her and noticed how the other people who was either crying softly, warmly smiling at him, or were curious. Luffy looking back at her and asked a question which broke the silence. Are you my mama? At this Big Mom breathed in before nodding slowly towards him. Yes, I am. Your mama. At this Luffy beamed, before looking in confusion. He wanted to hug her but he was smaller. Before thinking to himself, Gear Third can turn my arm or leg bigger so. Luffy put his thumb into his finger. Gear Third. Big Mom and her children tensed at this. They saw how he had put his thumb into his hand to enlarge it and hit that giant marine in that broadcast. Was he gonna hit her for not being there for him? What is he? One of them shouted, but wait. Katakuri said from behind, walking towards them. They finally docked and were worried. When he threw himself at them, the siblings looked at their older brother. He's not gonna hit her, he said slowly. At this they raised their eyebrows at their elder brother, before now focusing on their brother who was finally back. Luffy jumped and kept blowing, turning both his arms gigantic, and then his legs, then his body, then finally the head. After landing back onto the ground, their jaws dropped with Big Mom widening her eyes and gaping at this. Gigant man. He turned himself into a giant. Moscato exclaimed. Him and his siblings were shocked and were gaping at this. Luffy. Big Mom said, surprised. What was he gonna do now as a giant? Luffy grinned and opened his arms wide open. Big Mom closed her eyes thinking her son was gonna hit her. I am sorry, Luffy. I wasn't there for you. But instead Big Mom didn't feel that. Instead she had felt something she had never felt since she was born. She felt arms around her. She was being hugged, not like how her children hugged her fingers. No, she was actually being hugged. At this she opened her eyes and turned her head to look at Luffy with wide eyes, and he turned to looked at her with a smile on his face. It was nostalgic. It was like back them, the same sunny smile which felt warm. Her eyes started to become watery at taking a good look at her son's face. Luffy said one word which she wanted to hear ever since his birth, one word that she wanted to hear from all of her children. Mama. At that Big Mom couldn't hold it in anymore. She started sobbing before full-on crying while she held tightly onto him. Her son had finally came back home, and he had given her something she had wanted ever since she was a child, to be hugged. It was the reason why she wanted to get one of her own kind, so she could feel what was it like to be hugged. Everyone in the giant village was afraid of her for some reason which had hit her hard. She even became obsessed with giants because she wanted to be hugged for once. Her parents couldn't because they were small and they abandoned her. But now, she felt at peace. Her son's smile was warm, but his hugs. It felt like the sun had embraced her and accepted her for what she was. My boy, my baby boy. She sobbed into his shoulder while Luffy rubbed her back soothingly. The Charlottes were stunned before they started looking softly or warmly at the sight. They had never seen their mother cry before. When Luffy was stolen from them, their mother always looked like she was gonna cry at the mention of him, but she held them back, so when finally met with the sight of their brother who returned and turned into a giant and hugged their mother, which made her cry, they couldn't help but let out tears. This was the most emotional moment of their life. Amande, Katakuri, and Brulee were initially shocked before relaxing and looking on with happiness. After what their brother did for Brulee and Amande, they could understand. Their baby brother was able to warm people's hearts and heal mental scars and easily rid of people's insecurities. After a while, Luffy started to shrink down, but instead of reverting back to his normal size, he turned more smaller. Damn. I turned back like how I did when I was still back with Ace and Sabo. Luffy pouted and grumbled at this. He had made Gear 3rd after seeing a balloon from a book which Sabo had shown him. After explaining what a balloon was, he tried and was able to inflate his arm, but he turned smaller every time when he didn't fully master it yet. Ace, Sabo, and Makino, when she visited, would cuddle him when he was like that, although Ace would laugh at him. When he had turned small, most of the female siblings coo at this. So cute. Perospero walked forward, grabbed him up and raised him in front of his siblings, my brothers and sisters. Our 36th brother and 65th child of Memar has came home, Paroin Tilda. At this they grinned and smiled, some raising their hands in the air before voicing their celebrations and so on about Luffy's return. At this Luffy tilted his head. Are you guys my siblings? Perospero looked up and smiled. Yeah, we are, Paroin Tilda. Oh, okay. Perospero blinked a couple of times, then sweat dropped at that. He sure is quick to accept Paroin. Big Mom along with her children with Luffy in hand, they had passed him around. Many looked at him in curiosity. Some beamed and gushed at him, saying how he was adorable and cute like this. Walked back towards the castle. The citizens were too stunned to move at the events that unfolded. How the hell were they able to comprehend everything that had happened? At this, all of them conveniently decided to forget about this, as memories of this event would give a killer migraine. After returning back, she ordered her chefs to cook for dinner while her children all assembled. Around the dining table, Perospero sat Luffy down on a diner chair between Big Mom and himself, all siblings' attention towards their brother who has returned. After a while he turned back to normal, much to some of the siblings' disappointment, some pouting, wanting to cuddle him in his smaller form. Taking this moment to wait for the chefs to arrive, they decided to talk. Luffy tilted his head and crossed his arms. So, you guys are my siblings, which they all nodded at. Big Mom perked at this. She should probably announce her children. Luffy, this here are Perospero, Compote, Katakuri. She pointed and told the name her children. When they were called, they greeted Luffy with yo, hi, hellos, and other forms of introducing themselves towards their brother. After all said and done, Luffy stood up, smiled, and announced himself. Yo, I am Monkey D. Luffy. I am gonna become the king of the pirates. Compote snorted. Yeah, we heard. He did introduce himself on the snail phone after all. That really surprised the hell out of her. Luffy tilted his head. So, I have younger siblings. Flamp from the other side of the table responded vocally. Yeah. You are our Onii-chan. Pudding next to her nodded with her third eye closed. She didn't want her big brother to see her as a freak. The rest of siblings younger than Luffy nodded towards him. More importantly, how are you doing, Luffy? Smoothie asked, leaning forward in curiosity of his well-being. I'm okay. I just discovered Saboni was alive. Luffy beamed back at her with an innocent smile. Saboni. Smoothie tilted her head at that. Was there someone besides Fire Fist Ace who was a stepbrother? Yeah, Saboni. Me and Ace and Sabo shared a cup of sake together, which made us brothers. Luffy stated, which surprised them at this new information. Luffy continued on, but less happier. We were gonna set sail when we reached 17. But, Sabo sailed. Earlier, he was shot by a celestial dragon. Luffy scowled at mentioning the celestial dragon. The Siblings were surprised before looking worried. Was he okay? Raisin asked, worried on how Luffy had to experience his stepbrother being shot. Yeah, he was saved, but he had amnesia but he recovered his memories. He met up with Ace. And then they both met up with me. Luffy nodded at Raisin who looked relief along with some of his other siblings. What was he like? Galette asked leaning forward towards her brother with Poire also interested. In this, she had also closed her mouth so he wouldn't see her hideous teeth. Sabo was like Ace. He hated his parents. Although Ace hated Roger, not his mom, and also he was kinder than Ace. He always hugged me when I cried like Ace did. Luffy said beaming. Where is he now? Poire asked. Luffy gasped when she saw her open her mouth and saw her teeth. Whoa, your teeth. At this Poire paled at the realization of accidentally displaying her teeth. Her siblings, most prominent being Galette and Basskarte and Katakuri, flinched at this and prepared for an insult. He wasn't raised with them after all. Amande, Brulee just started to smile towards Poire. Luffy leaped at her from his dining chair and landing next to her and came to her face to face. She started sweating and waiting for what comment he was gonna make about them. It's so cool, he said with stars in his eyes. His siblings were stunned and surprised at that. Poire widened her eyes before getting watery. She would always be mocked because of her teeth. Galette, her twin and any other sibling who had accompanied her had gotten into several fights because of that, not to mention how those mean Marines had taken her to an alleyway and mocked her. She had been insecure about it. Luffy, on the other hand, her little brother who was raised outside the family, was complimenting. Where did you get them? Luffy asked her in awe. IIW was born with them. Why you don't think they are hideous? She asked snakingly and with hope in her eyes. Luffy tilted his head in confusion. Why would they be hideous? They look so cool. Why would I? They look amazing. I want them. Luffy said, going back to staring at her in amazement. Poire widened her eyes at that and had tears in her eyes. Her little brother didn't think they were hideous. He even wanted them. Ah, really? She asked him, and he just nodded his head rapidly with stars in his eyes still. She beamed at him for that. Her brother liked her teeth. So cool. Luffy muttered. Poire, after wiping her tears, was now getting flustered. She was used to her siblings saying her teeth were fine and that was nothing wrong. Luffy, on the other hand, complimented and praised her teeth and was still staring in amazement of her. It was really embarrassing. Galette, who was sitting next to her, beamed at Luffy for complimenting Poire's teeth. She stood up and went to him and ruffled his head for that. She was grateful for what he did, and much to her twin's embarrassment. She joined in. Right. Her teeth just make her SOO adorable, Galette said with pride in her voice with a big grin, while her siblings looked amused and smirked at what she was doing. Gee, Galette. Poire spluttered out while blushing harder at the fact her twin was also complimenting them. Yeah, I wish I had them also, Luffy said with a grin of his own. Both Galette and Luffy were now praising her teeth in several ways. The rest of the family were happy at the fact their little brother didn't mind her looks, even envying her of her teeth. They looked at Poire amused at how red she looked, some even adding their own positive comments on her teeth, much to her irritation. She really does look amazing with them. Hachieni-san. Kukuku tilde, she has always been cute. Peroin tilde. Peros ni sama. Of course she's always been cute. All my little sisters are. Brulee, oh Brulee sama. Now at that the younger Charlotte's sisters were flustered by Brulee's claim. Poire Wani-chan always looked pretty cool with them teeth. Mayukuru-chan. Poire had covered her face with her hands at this point, her face somehow getting more redder and redder at the onslaught of compliments ranging from cool, cute, amazing, and adorable. I want to bury myself in a hole, she internally whined. Big Mom was amused by how her children who joined in on Galette and Luffy praising Poire. She smiled at Luffy. He didn't mind his siblings' looks. After a while she decided to help Poire, who looked like she would faint from sheer embarrassment. All right, that's enough. Spare your sister who may pass out soon. Big Mom said, which had quieted them down. Slam. Thank you, Mema. Poire had slammed her head onto the table while turning her head towards her mom. Her head was steaming from all those compliments, although she was internally happy and beaming about their little brother. He thought her teeth were cool. Although you really do look cute with those teeth, my adorable child. Big Mom finished with a shit-eating grin. Sure, she may be nicer to her kids, but she still was sadistic in a way. Mema. Poire whined while shooting a look betrayal at their mom, her siblings giggling or snickering at that. Luffy was now sitting on Galette's lap when she took a seat. She raised an eyebrow at this but smiled while wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his hair with a lazy grin. Galette remembered Poire's prior question. Lifting her head she asked him, "Any Luffy?" Luffy leaned into her and looked up at her with innocent eyes and chirped in response. Seeing this as a sign of her getting his attention, she asked, "You didn't answer Poire's question. Where is he now?" "He's back at Dad's base. He's a revolutionary." At this they scowled at the mention of dragon. "Do you know about your dad?" Galette asked, and to her and the family's surprise, his response was different than what they imagined. This will be all for today. Next part coming soon, so please like and subscribe so you could get notified as soon as the next part drops.